Hey guys, how's it going? This is Kevin Asani, and you are watching The Progressive Square. I really appreciate you guys tuning in for this one. It's going to be an interesting episode. We're going to be covering some more Joe Biden news, some interesting articles regarding Medicare-for-all, some stuff about Beto O'Rourke. So it's going to be a jam-packed show. Right before I get my show started, I just want to remind you guys to please check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/Prog Blacksmith. And if you could donate, $1, $2, $3, I would really appreciate it. A good way to try and keep this show going as long as possible. So let's get on to the first story here. As many of you know, there is obviously there's a big kind of wave of wave of outrage going on regarding abortion right now, because the state of Alabama recently passed a anti-abortion law that pretty much restricts abortion to its absolute depths. There's at this point, and the bill has already passed, and it's been signed into law by the governor, who's a female, by the way, an older woman. I forgot what her name was, but she's actually the new Alabama governor. But she's obviously very right wing. And she signed this bill into law, so it's kind of creating this wave of anti-abortion legislation coming up in other states. I think Louisiana is doing it. I believe Missouri is doing it. Those are the other two that I can think of. But there's a big fear that this could lead to a lot of other states doing the same thing. So, in relation to that, I kind of came across an article from about almost 2 months ago. It was late March, March 29th this year to be exact, from the New York Times, where they covered the past abortion views of Joe Biden when he was still in the Senate back then too, actually, because he's, if I'm correct, I believe I'm correct in assuming that Joe Biden has been in the Senate his entire career. He hasn't been in any other political position, obviously, of course, if you don't count VP, Vice President of Barack Obama. But as far as when it comes to the legislative branch of the government, the only seat that he has had is in the Senate, and that was in his home state of Delaware. I'm sorry, not his home state. Home state is actually Pennsylvania, but his the other state that he resides in. So he does not have he has a very checkered past when it comes to the issue of abortion, and this was covered very substantially in the New York Times in this article, and I wanted to read it for you guys, and we can discuss it afterwards, or just discuss it as I'm reading in between. So the title of the article is "When Joe Biden Voted to Let States Overturn Roe v. Wade." So obviously, as you know, Roe v. Wade is the Supreme Court case that allowed abortion to be legalized in the United States. A lot of people are fearing that might be overturned because of this Alabama law, and since the Supreme Court is currently in the hands of how many conservatives how many conservatives, I believe? 5 or 6, I think. So there's a big fear that might happen right now. So let's check it out here. So it says, it was a new era in Washington in 1981, and abortion rights activists were terrified. With an anti-abortion President Ronald Reagan in power and Republicans controlling the Senate for the first time in decades, social conservatives pushed for a constitutional amendment to allow individual states to overturn Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court ruling that had made abortion legal nationwide several years earlier. The amendment, which the National Abortion Rights Action League called the most devastating attack yet on abortion rights, cleared a key hurdle in the Senate Judiciary Committee in March 1982. Support came not only from Republicans, but from a 39-year-old second-term Democrat, Joseph R. Biden Jr. Let's see. So it says here, it's a quote from him, actually. It says, "I'm probably a victim or a product, however you want to phrase it, of my background," Mr. Biden, a Roman Catholic, said at the time. The decision, he said, was the single most difficult vote I've cast as a U.S. Senator. The bill never made it to the full Senate, and when it came back up the following year, Mr. Biden voted against it. His back and forth over abortion would become a hallmark of his political career. Yeah, so the next paragraph here says, as Mr. Biden prepares for the possibility of a third presidential run, women's rights leaders and activists in both parties are recalling these shifts on abortion, which are likely to draw fresh scrutiny in a Democratic primary race where women are expected to make up a majority of voters. Let's see. Mr. Biden entered the Senate in 1973 as a 30-year-old practicing Catholic who soon concluded that the Supreme Court went too far on abortion rights in the Roe case. He told an interviewer the following year that a woman shouldn't have the sole right to say what should happen to her body. By the time he left the vice president's mansion in the early 2017, he was a 74-year-old who argued a far different view, that government doesn't have a right to tell other people that women, they can't control their body, as he put it in 2012. And I just wanted to say as an aside that Hillary Clinton, so Hillary Clinton was the nominee in 2016, her choice for her VP was also a Roman Catholic, and that's Tim Kaine of Virginia. She chose him as her VP. A lot of people in the progressive movement found that as an issue because he is very, very centrist. He's very establishment. He is also, I guess, on the principle of his religious beliefs, is anti-abortion, but apparently he's pro-choice. Regardless, but he has had like anti-abortion views. So it's very curious when these choices are made for VP. I mean, that's a very important, pick to many people. I don't think it's as important when it comes to that person actually being the VP, because when you're the VP, you are basically doing all the stuff that the president does not want to do. So you're basically like a lackey to the president. You're like his servant, essentially, in many ways, his or her servant in many ways, because you just do whatever that president doesn't want to do while the president handles all the big issues. And the VP obviously will give advice and they'll chime in on some things here and there, but a lot of times they'll attend funerals and go to different events that the president is not able to do because they're busy with their own stuff. So a lot of times the VP will take over that role. So I think that's, I think when it comes to the context of choosing a VP for the actual race that's coming up in the general election, I think it's a big deal because that sways a lot of people to be like, oh, okay, so what is the judgment of this person when they're choosing them as their VP, and like I said, they do a lot of times the VPs do give advice to the president when they're in office. So obviously that has a role too, but I don't think it has that much of as much of an impact as people think it does. But like I said, I think it has a much bigger impact, comparatively. It has a much bigger impact to an actual presidential race, even when you so when that team, so that ticket is running for re-election, that's also a big deal too. So Yeah, so but I think it's a big deal in that sense, and that should be. I mean, obviously, you can, different people can look at it in different ways. That's just my take. I just think it's not as important as people make it out to be, but it's obviously a much bigger deal when you're, deciding to run in that, for that, not, for that actual presidential race in that general election. So let me continue here. It says, abortion has long been a difficult issue for Catholic Democrats and leaders, including former Governor Mario Cuomo of New York, Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, and Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. Many Catholic Democrats in government have cited their faith in explaining their personal opposition to abortion while taking stands to support abortion rights, and in some cases also holding positions in favor of some abortion restrictions. A Pew Research Center poll last fall showed Catholics divided on whether abortion should be legal. It says, but some of Mr. Biden's more moderate to conservative stances in his legislative record are raising concerns in the party about whether he could win over an ascendant liberal wing eager to impose purity tests around issues of race and gender in 2020. Even before announcing a candidacy, Mr. Biden has started trying to rebut those concerns, telling party officials in Delaware this month that he has the most progressive record of anyone running for president. So when it comes to Biden stating, he's said this many times, this whole thing about how he's the most progressive this and the most progressive that, I mean, these are just like very like cliche rebuttals to people calling him out on substantive issues. And since he doesn't have much else to say other than, oh, well, I'm very progressive and I'm very consistent and I'm very this and I've fought for the American people. So he just throws out all these like platitudes about how he's, a great guy, even though his record from I don't know how many years ago is completely different. He doesn't have much of a response other than to put something like that out. Now, to be fair, yes, people can change over time. People can, change their positions. People can evolve. People can progress. People, even Bernie Sanders, as much as people love him, in the past, maybe he had some, well, then again, honestly, Bernie Sanders was actually a lot more to the left before. So people love him for that. Now, maybe he's not as leftist as he used to be. If you look into his record, he was much more anti-interventionism. He was much more pro different communist, much more, I would say, sympathetic to communist ideology, much more sympathetic to socialist ideology. And to a lot of leftists out there, that's not a big problem. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not really that bothered by it. But then again, since I'm not a communist, I'm not a socialist, I'm a progressive. So, I don't necessarily agree with everything that communism, socialism puts out. So I'm not going to immediately agree with everything that those things that those ideologies stand for. However, when it comes to leftist ideology, I feel that as far left as you can go, you can get, you have a better chance of getting far left policies enacted and passed. So I'm okay with, ideologies that go far to the left, as long as they don't become any kind of, authoritarianism or fascism, then I'm okay with it. Obviously, that's not the case in today's form of leftism. That doesn't require any kind of fascism or authoritarianism. A lot of the right wingers say that, but that's bullshit. So I'm not of that opinion. I would have to be stupid to think that, because that's just not the case. But we're getting off into a little bit of a tangent here. But all I want to say is that Bernie Sanders has changed his views. Joe Biden has changed his views. Whatever, Hillary Clinton, all these different people have changed in a lot of ways. But the difference is that when Joe Biden changes his views from, it's different when Joe Biden says, okay, I was anti-abortion or I was pro-life or whatever they call it when they're the Catholics. I don't know, whatever it's, labeled the Catholics that he use. But whatever they are, when they were like that before, that's one thing when you were like that in, 20, 30 years ago or however long it was, 40 years ago. That's totally different than when you're changing your views now, because a lot of his views now, maybe on abortion he doesn't, but on a lot of other things he's willing to so-called compromise. So Joe Biden will be the type of person who will happily go out there and just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to compromise, so-called compromise on regulating Wall Street. I'm going to compromise on doing entitlement cuts. I'm going to compromise on tax cuts. I'm going to compromise on the defense budget. He's going to be in favor of the right-wing positions of these kind of different issues, so he's going to take the right flank on those kind of things, just because he thinks, well, I have to compromise and that's just what I have to do. I don't think that's compromise. I think that's selling out. And I was having a lengthy, back and forth debate with a troll on Twitter recently, and they honestly couldn't understand the idea of compromise. They thought compromise was like, yeah, you can totally sell out and totally give in to, or at least that's the way I was putting it, the fact that you're selling out, your specific views. But that person was, making excuses for the fact that you can just take this position and just okay, well, I call it compromise. I think it's a compromise, but in reality, it's not a compromise. And, whether it's, being in favor of wars and, cutting taxes for the rich and then not doing that much on climate change, that's another issue that's a lot of people are taking with Joe Biden. But, when you hedge on those kind of things, and when you hedge is that's the slightest bit of, so-called compromise that you can do. Hedging is just I'm just gonna give in a little bit, but these people hedge to the point of just going way too far, and that's what the likes of Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, all these kind of people do. So it's much different to say that I'm willing to compromise on this issue or that issue, compared to I'm just gonna completely sell out my position, sell out the people that I said I was gonna do A, B, and C, and then I completely do something else. So that's not what Joe Biden, Joe Biden's not compromising. He's selling out. So again, if you're going to progress from, 30 and 40 years ago, and your views are going to progress and you're going to evolve, that's a different story compared to right now, when you claim you're doing the same kind of evolution and progress when you're really not. So he says, oh, I'm the most progressive, I have the most progressive record. No, you don't. That's bullshit. And he just says that because he has nothing else to say. He doesn't have any other response to come up with when it comes to the issue, various issues. At least in this case, we're talking about abortion. And, it's, that in that case, fine, maybe he did. But on a lot of other issues, that's not the case. So he just uses the same platitude and cliche talking point that he does for other issues. He's using it for abortion now. Here it says, this is quoting Elise Hogue, who's the president of NARAL, which is a abortion rights organization. She says, anxiety is super high among women across the country. Joe Biden is trying to carve out a space for himself as the middle moderate candidate, and he's going to have to really get with the times and understand that standing with abortion rights is the middle moderate position. I agree with that. She added, I can't tell you if he's there or not. Says Mr. Biden is already facing criticism from some women's rights groups, some women's rights activists, over his aggressive questioning of Anita Hill during the Supreme Court confirmation hearings of Judge Clarence Thomas in 1991. We covered that on last week's show, and that, they didn't even show Biden's comments. I wasn't able to get into the specific comments that he made regarding his questioning of Anita Hill, but what they were showing in the clip that I showed, which was a Vice clip, Vice News clip, they were showing a lot of Republicans, and there might have been a couple Democrats, I don't know, but there was just a lot of people that were questioning Anita Hill for are you writing a book, and are you doing this for, is anybody paying you, and so people were making a lot of those idiot members of Senate Judiciary Committee. They were making a lot of stupid statements, and they were, and the whole time Joe Biden was sitting there as the chair of that Judiciary Committee, and he wasn't, he wasn't like even like opposing any of the questions that were being stated by these questions that were being put out there by these other members of the committee. But to be fair, I don't know what he said, so maybe it details it in this article, or maybe I'll look for it and I'll play it for you guys. But according to this, let's just see what this article says, and then maybe we'll see if we can find the video. It says Mr. Biden's comment Tuesday that he wished he could have done something to give Ms. Hill's claims of sexual harassment a more respectful hearing drew fierce backlash from critics who pointed out that Mr. Biden was chairman of the Senate committee that questioned Ms. Hill. Some women's rights leaders say Mr. Biden must offer a stronger and more personal apology to Mrs. Hill, as well as clarify his views on a broad range of issues, including sexual assault, harassment, and Republicans' efforts to limit abortion access. Says Mr. Biden has spoken warmly about some Republicans and bipartisanship in recent months. So, like I said, this article is from March 29th, so late March of this year. So this is before, I believe this is before he declared, right? Yeah, because he declared in April, I believe. So he made obviously whatever testimony, however he was involved in any kind of testimony in back when he was the chair of that committee, and then, Anita Hill got questioned and all that stuff. So whatever comments he made, he had, so we covered it on last week's episode of the Progressive Square, and we highlighted how he went on The View. And he had some other comments, I think, that might have made to just kind of like the press in general, where he said, yeah, I could have done a lot more, but I don't think I did anything wrong. So he was just like totally contradicting himself, especially when it came to the interview that he did on The Hill, which, again, I covered on last week's show. And he can contradict himself. Yeah, I could have done more, but I don't think I did anything wrong. So, and they didn't really press him that much. I mean, they did question him, like, why, I think it was Joy Behar or somebody that was questioning him and saying, why didn't you come out sooner and make the statement sooner instead of waiting so long, blah, blah, blah. His wife just made a totally ridiculous comment saying we should just move on from this, which was ridiculous. That's a very elitist, kind of white person point of view to take on an issue that is involving a black woman who was clearly treated with ridiculous contempt by a bunch of white senators, so white politicians, white male politicians, not even any females. I don't know if they were pressing. I don't know if there was any females on that committee, but I didn't see any. But yeah, I don't know if any females criticized Anita Hill, but that video alone that showed all the men criticizing her was bad enough to show what kind of contempt was being shown for her just for coming out and saying that Clarence Thomas, sexually harassed her and sexually assaulted her. So the rest of the article doesn't really get into that much detail on anything. It just kind of goes over the different views that he's had, and then how he's evolved. They quote a couple of people that are like some religious outreach people. What is this? Former head of the religious outreach of the DNC. I don't know. They're probably a lot of those people are probably gonna defend him or something. It says that he drew praise from some people for questioning, from supporters of abortion rights for questioning another judge that was about their opposition to a ruling that struck down birth control bans. So, I mean, again, like I said before, Joe Biden has evolved on the issue. Yeah, this is just kind of like the rest of the article is just going through like his years of like evolution, essentially. So he has done that. It says in 2003 he backed a third ban that included no exception for the health of the mother. Sponsored. Hold on. So he did involve or didn't evolve. So there was blah blah blah. It says it did not, as I would have liked, ban all post-viability abortions, he said, backing a proposal by Senator Tom Daschle that would include an exception if the mother's health was at risk. I was and still am concerned that in banning on partial birth abortions, we do not go far enough. So you want to go even farther. Wow. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. He constantly flip-flops. And then it says he sponsored a bill by Rick Santorum, who's like one of the biggest fucking right-wingers that has ever held a position in the Senate. Santorum also pushed for something, and then Biden backed that as well. And yeah, so, I mean, and it says when Mr. Obama picked him as vice president more than a year later, some abortion rights advocates worried about Mr. Biden's record, but they felt confident that Mr. Obama's more liberal views on the issue would prevail. Recalled Kate McKeilman, a former leader of NARAL. Joe Biden continued his evolution on the issue under Obama. He got there. She said, I can't say for absolute 100%, but I would trust him as president to protect and defend women's rights to choose. See, I don't agree. Like, I don't believe, like, he can't be trusted on that. If you're evolving in 2008, right? So that was just over 10 years ago. If he's evolving in 2008 after being chosen as VP and then during being VP, I mean, isn't that a little long? I mean, talk about taking your time. And this was after, again, like I read it from this parts of this article, where he was siding with the likes of Santorum, and he was pushing for bills that were putting a ban on partial, like, post viability abortions and partial birth abortion. Yeah. So either way, I mean, it just seems like from the tone of this article, it seems, and just based on what I'm reading, kind of like a cursory viewing of the rest of this article, it seems like Joe Biden obviously has never been consistent on the view on the issue of abortion. He constantly keeps jumping back and forth. 1 second he's for it, 1 second he's against it. I mean, make up your mind, man. You're either for it or you're against it. And it just seems like he wants to constantly be on specific sides of the issue that either will benefit him politically or that it's benefiting his religious views. So you don't know if he's standing up for something that has to do with his religious views, or it's standing up for what he believes that his, like, what the views of, like, the Democratic Party and kind of like that liberal point of view, pro-choice point of view. So I don't even know. I mean, right now, okay, he's pro-choice, but he's just hasn't been consistent with it. It just has not been a consistent point of view of Joe Biden to maintain a position on abortion and just stick with that, and then promise people, like, listen, I'm not going to stab you in the back. Now, if he becomes president, I don't think we're going to be seeing Joe Biden, like, being like, oh yeah, we're gonna be putting a ban on partial birth abortions and this, and, like, I don't think that's gonna happen. So I mean, objectively speaking, I don't think we're gonna expect any kind of, like, just a complete flip flop if Biden is president, because he knows the impact that's gonna create among the Democratic Party, and they're just gonna be like, flipping out if he were president. Obviously, I'm not. I definitely don't hope I definitely hope he doesn't become president. But if he were to, I mean, I don't think we would expect him to become like that, to just flip again, just because he knows the political impact. But again, this doesn't. When it comes to his views of abortion, I think he's going to remain consistent on abortion, and he's going to remain pro-choice. But this is the larger picture of this, is that he is not going to remain. He's not going to be able to be consistent on any issue. You don't know what he's going to flip on. Just like the issues that I was talking about before, whether it's healthcare, whether it's regulating Wall Street, climate change, all these different issues. It just seems like he just can't. When it comes to war, war. He's voted for the Iraq War. He voted for the Patriot Act. When it comes to foreign policy and stuff like that, like, and just like the Constitution and stuff, like, he just doesn't give it. I think he was even against flag burning, which, just reminds me of Hillary Clinton, another issue that she was in favor of that was ridiculous. He was against flag burning too. Flag burning is a constitutional right. So see, you can't trust anything that these so-called Democrat I don't know, what do you want to call it, liberal Democrats say, because they're not. They're just right-wing Democrats. It's what they really are when you look deep into their views. And you just can't trust what they're going to say, because one second they're going to say one thing, next second they're going to say another thing, and a lot of it is just going to be stuff to say so they can please their, they can please their loyalists, and then get into office, and then when they're in office, then they're just going to completely flip. So I can't trust Joe Biden when it comes to that, when it comes to this kind of stuff. Abortion is one thing, but when it comes to just, kind of like a general landscape of progressive issues, he is definitely not the most progressive, as much as he wants to repeat that. So that's just obvious to me. Should be obvious to everybody else too. So the next issue regarding Joe Biden I wanted to cover was so it's also another view that he had from many years ago that so I guess it's like a video or something that resurfaced regarding his view on immigration and the drug war. So let me just read. Let me just read quickly, just like kind of the intro part of this article. It's from CNN. It says, Joe Biden once said a fence was needed to stop tons of drugs from Mexico. So this not only involves the actual building of a fence, which obviously President Trump wants to do and has pushed for doing, but also, kind of like the whole issue of drugs. And if I remember correctly, I think I saw another video from a while back from recently, where Joe Biden said, so he said it a while ago, but the video just resurfaced recently, where he said like he doesn't believe in like the legalization of like anything. Like he wants to decriminalize everything. I'm saying he wants to criminalize everybody, pretty much every kind of drug, whether it's marijuana, whether it's cocaine, heroin, all that stuff, meth, so opioids, all that stuff. So and that's fine. I mean, we can have that debate and like debate what should and should not be decriminalized or criminalized. But I mean, just like just the fact that he has like such prehistoric views on drugs today is actually pretty ridiculous. Especially when you see somebody like Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard and a lot of these people standing up against the idea of criminalizing these drugs and actually pushing for just full legalization. So I'm going to read. So let me read part of the article here. It says, Joe Biden once spoke about jailing employers who hired illegals. He used the word illegals, apparently. Said sanctuary cities shouldn't be allowed to violate federal law, and argued a fence was needed to stop tons of drugs coming into the country from corrupt Mexico, quote unquote. Then Senator Biden's past comments, which he made in the run-up to and during the 2008 presidential race, that was less than 10 years ago, before he was chosen as Obama's VP. He made these comments. And says, during the 2008 presidential race, showing an approach to the issue of immigration that could run afoul of the party's more liberal wing as Biden seeks the Democratic nomination to take on President Donald Trump in 2020. It also shows how Biden's long record in government can at times provide a contrast to where the Democratic Party has evolved in recent years. It says, so let me read this. What is this? Like 2 paragraphs, I think. No, you know what? Let's watch the video first, and then I'll read it. I'll read it out to you guys. Let me read this part. Let me read just this one segment here, and then the next part is a quote, and then it's probably the same thing he already says in the. I guess he says in the segment here. So let me read this part. It says, speaking to a South Carolina Rotary Club in November 2006, Biden touted his support for the Secure Fence Act, a bill that authorized 700 miles of double-layered fence on the border through more than $1 billion in appropriations. The bill was also supported by then-Senators Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Wow. CNN's K-File reviewed the video, which had been posted on YouTube at the time. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. So this is referring to that same speech. So I'm going to play you the video, and then I'm going to read the rest of the, read how the article quotes him here. just to focus on kind of the main things that he said. So here it is. Check it out.
The country that is an erstwhile democracy where they have the greatest disparity in wealth. It's one of the wealthiest countries in the hemisphere. And because of a corrupt system that exists in Mexico, there is the 1% of the population at the top, a very small middle class, and the rest is abject poverty. Folks, I voted for a fence. I voted, unlike most Democrats, and some of you won't like it, I voted for 700-mile fence. But let me tell you, we can build a fence 40 stories high, unless it changes the dynamic in Mexico. And you will not like this, and punish American employers who knowingly violate the law when in fact they hire illegals. Unless you do those two things, all the rest is window dressing. Now I know I'm not supposed to say it that bluntly, but they're the facts. They're the facts. And so everything else we do is in between here. Everything else we do is at the margin. The reason why why I believe the fence is needed is not related to immigration as much as to drugs. I'm the guy that wrote the National Crime Bill. I'm the guy that wrote the National Drug Act. I'm the guy that wrote the law that set up a drug czar. But let me tell you something, folks. People are driving across that border with tons, hear me, tons of everything from byproducts from methamphetamine to cocaine to heroin. And it's all coming up through corrupt Mexico. So I would have, as they say in the southern part of my state, I'd have an altar call with those boys. I'd have a little come to the Lord meeting. You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. Any of you know about me. I've been doing this a long time. I've known every single major world leader in every country for the past 20 years. And I know a lot of them well because they came up like you guys do business. I've been a senator. There's only 4 senators served longer than me in the history of the United States Senate. There's 44 senators. But the bottom line, folks, is we got to level with these folks. Don't tell me in Mexico do you expect to get the same kind of treatment that we give other democracies, and then you don't act in a democratic way? Not on my watch. Not on my watch. Yes, sir.
So, listen to that, folks. That's Joe Biden for you. That is the Joe Biden of 2006. This is a video, literally. This was posted in November 2007, 2006. No, I'm sorry, November 27th, 2006. And it apparently was a Q&A with his audience at the Columbia, South Carolina Rotary Club, wading out into the crowd to answer a question about immigration. So I'm guessing most likely there was somebody that was asking about immigration. You know, they were probably anti-immigration, and he wanted to cater to this specific audience, and he just goes on this like fucking rant about how these immigrants are bringing tons and tons of drugs in. Okay, so let me read the way the CNN article quotes it. It says, "Folks, I voted for a fence. I voted, unlike most Democrats, and some of you won't like it, I voted for 700 miles of fence. But let me tell you, we can build a fence 40 stories high unless you change the dynamic in Mexico, and you will not like this, and punish American employers who knowingly violate the law when in fact they hire illegals. Unless you do those two things, all the rest is window dressing." He continues on here. He says, "Now I know I'm not supposed to say it that bluntly, but they're the facts. They're the facts. And so everything else we do is in between here. Everything else we do is at the margins. And the reason why I add that parenthetically, why I believe the fence is needed, does not have anything to do with immigration as much as drugs." Biden continued, "And let me tell you something, folks. People are driving across that border with tons, hear me, tons of everything from byproducts from methamphetamine to cocaine to heroin, and it's all coming up through Mexico." I think that's the end of that. Yeah. So that's the end of the quotes that the end of the kind of statements he made from that clip from 2006. And this was back in the days of Joe Biden. I'm sorry, these were back from the days when, kind of catching something on cell phone footage or video footage, it wasn't very common. I mean, obviously cell phones existed in 2006, but this kind of it was not, this was 13 years ago. So almost 13 years ago. So this was not the days of today when people were catching everything that was happening on cell phone, or, that was happening in public on a cell phone, and people were, showing it on the internet. But luckily this person, apparently their name is Brad Warthen, they posted this in 2006, and good on them. I mean, this is a clip of Joe Biden clearly being fully in favor of just being hardline anti-immigration, hardline anti-legalization, decriminalization of drugs. Because if he was for it, he would have actually said it. I mean, in general, Joe Biden doesn't strike me as somebody that would say, like, yeah, we should totally, legalize and decriminalize drugs. He's so fucking old school, but he pretends to be like woke and, in with the times, but he's not. But he would, he's not that kind of person who's going to be in favor of that. And he definitely wasn't in favor of it back then, let alone today. Today, he would just take more of like what they call a measured stance. And he would be like, oh, well, listen, I understand, people are, they're getting caught for having drugs on them, and it's really terrible. So, like, essentially African Americans and, Hispanics, anybody that's being pulled over for being pulled over or just kind of fucking harassed by cops. Like, he's going to be like, oh, I'm totally sympathetic to that. Don't worry about it. I'm totally on the side of African Americans and Hispanics that get fucking, beaten down and arrested and, shoved their heads into the ground and shot, killed, God forbid, for the, because they have drugs on them or they're selling something, they're smoking something or they're whatever, sniffing something, whatever they're doing. He's going to claim to be sympathetic to those views, or something sympathetic to those people and to the people that want to legalize those, those kind of drugs. But he's not, and that's not something Joe Biden is ever going to be in favor of. I mean, hell, Barack Obama wasn't even in favor of that, and Barack Obama was somebody that actually had smoked weed. He had smoked marijuana when he was a younger man. He was part of something called the Choom Gang. So he was actually part of a gang, not a gang, but I don't want to say he was part of a gang. He wasn't a black guy that was part of a gang. So he was part of like what they called the Choom Gang, apparently, where they were just like a bunch of, hippies or something that were just hanging out and smoking weed. And it's like, there's like a famous picture of him in like some sort of like top hat or something from, 60s or probably 70s probably. And he was probably like in his 20s or something. And, he has like a top hat on. He's like, I think he's got like a blunt in his hand, and then he's like smoking it, and then he blows it out or something. Yeah. So I don't know if I find that picture, maybe I can show it to you guys. But yeah. So I don't know. It's just hard to hear Joe Biden like this, and it's hard to hear this and then believe like, oh yeah, he's going to be like totally, he's going to be like a total like fair and like democratic in his kind of like his thought process. Think of it in a way that's going to be like, fair. He's going to claim to be fair. He's going to be like, oh yeah, we totally need to be, we need to be nicer to the immigrants that are coming across, and but in reality, he's going to be enforcing ICE just like ICE is enforced right now. I don't know if he's going to be doing the same kind of like the separation of children away from their parents. So separating Hispanic kids away from their parents. But I mean, so Obama was already doing that in 2014, I believe it was, and there was articles that came out that showed pictures of from that, and it was clearly from then. So from that period of time, and it was under Obama's presidency, and Obama was totally in favor of ICE existing. He was not in favor of abolishing ICE at all. Obama, and he, on top of it, Obama President Obama, what was it, 600,000? Yeah, 600,000 Hispanic immigrants were deported under President Obama's tenure in that 8-year period. And that was even more than George Bush, if I remember correctly. So, and George Bush was ridiculous. I mean, I don't think it was ridiculously anti-immigration, but he was definitely in favor of like the whole border wall thing and kind of like, stricter enforcement on border patrol and whatnot, especially because John McCain was in favor of that. So, and John McCain was in the Senate, obviously. So he pushed George Bush to be hard on that. So that was like a big thing with John McCain, especially since he was from the state of Arizona. But when it comes to, so if Biden were president, I don't think he would be enforcing the child separation laws, which are being enforced right now under President Trump by his different people that work on they're under ICE and different whatever immigration enforcement that's involved. So the people that are running that shit, I forgot what the guy's name is that's running kind of like the immigration enforcement ICE kind of department. But I don't see Biden do that. And the only reason why I say I don't see Biden doing the child separation aspect of it is because he knows that Trump is getting totally fucking lambasted and hit super hard on all of this, anti-immigration stuff, especially on the issue of child separation. So Biden would be stupid to push for that kind of policy under his administration. Now, that's just my prediction. I'm not saying he's not going to. I'm just saying that I don't believe he would. And as much as Biden is a fucking buffoon and an idiot, I don't think he would be stupid enough to push for that, knowing that Trump did it. That's all. That's the only way I'm looking at it. I'm trying to look at it at that whole kind of thing as in an objective way, and I just see it as him not being dumb enough to fall for something like that and let that happen, knowing that Trump did it, outlawed that, pushed for that law so much, and obviously is doing it right now and has people in his administration who are pushing for it. So. I just wanted to read a statement from Joe Biden's spokesman from the CNN article. It says, Andrew Bates, a spokesman for Joe Biden, said he believes in working toward border security without compromising values. I don't know what that means. And he opposes cracking down on sanctuary cities. Okay, so from what I know, just before I continue in reading the quote here, it says, from what I know, sanctuary cities it's a very liberal point of view. That's I don't know if it's progressive, but it's a very liberal point of view. It's a very kind of pro-democratic, loyalist point of view. Like a lot of Democrats are, we're in favor of sanctuary cities. So it's surprising that he would want to. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading this wrong. That's my mistake. He says he opposes cracking down on sanctuary cities. So that's actually a good thing. So I mean, if he opposes that, that's a good thing. As far as I remember, President Obama did not. He was also he was also pushing for the same thing. So he did not crack down on sanctuary cities. He supported the policy of sanctuary cities and allowing immigrants to exist in certain cities. So I think like San Francisco, for example. I used to live in San Francisco. I think that's a sanctuary city. I'm sure there's a lot of sanctuary cities around where I live in LA right now. So yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, that's a good thing to see. I guarantee you Biden was not in favor of, did not oppose cracking down on sanctuary cities before. I guarantee you he was definitely anti-sanctuary city before. Especially when you watch from that 2006 clip that I just played. I mean, based on all the rhetoric that he's saying from that clip, you would definitely expect him to be anti-sanctuary city for sure. So the fact that he opposes cracking down on them now is, I think, just like typical Joe Biden opportunism. Okay, so let me just read the quote from his spokesman here. He says, as then Senator Biden said at the time, we can build a fence 40 stories high, but it will not address the real issues here. Vice President Biden believes we have to stop trying to scare people and instead have an immigration discussion based on facts. He believes that we can secure our borders without abandoning our values, and that we should do that by addressing the root causes of immigration abroad and working toward comprehensive immigration reform at home, including a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and smart border security. He also believes that the Trump administration's approach to immigration, including its crackdown on sanctuary cities and especially its repugnant treatment of migrant children, is contrary to our values as a nation. So, like I said, yeah, he's not going to be in favor of the crackdown in sanctuary cities. He's definitely not going to be in favor of, putting migrant children in cages. But the question is, did somebody like Joe Biden, so first of all, was Joe Biden against the idea of this treatment of migrant children when he was vice president? Like I said, President Obama was putting migrant children in cages. That was covered. I can even post the article for you in the description box if you guys don't believe me. It was an article from, I believe it was Jacobin, which is a left-wing publication. Barack Obama did push for like I said, 600,000 immigrants were Hispanic immigrants were deported. 600,000. That's a hell of a lot. I mean, it got so much to the point that it was becoming a net negative. It was becoming a net negative in number of, like, the net number of immigrants in the country was becoming, it was like the amount of immigrants that were being deported was surpassing the number of immigrants that are in this country. So I'm talking about like illegal immigrants. So the immigrants that are here illegally, so they're not legal immigrants. The illegal immigrants that were being surpassed in the number that existed in this country because they were all being deported to the tune of 600,000 plus. So it was a net negative. And so obviously, so when it comes to the issue of, treatment of migrant children, was Joe Biden telling Obama that, this is a terrible thing and was, you shouldn't be doing this? I guarantee you he wasn't saying anything. I would be very surprised if he did, because if he didn't, if he was telling Obama that, or even Obama was realizing it, which he didn't, obviously, they would have done something about it. They would have gotten together. They would have put their heads together and be like, listen, this is a terrible issue. We shouldn't be doing this. So for his spokesman to come out right now and being, claiming like, oh, he's so against, I can't believe the way migrant children are treated. Well, obviously you didn't really give a shit about it back then. You're just all of a sudden giving a shit about it because Donald Trump made it so bad. So when it comes to Donald Trump, the treatment of migrant children was already bad before, so Trump only made it worse. Trump made it worse than it is right now. So it was already bad before, but he's only made it worse. So that's kind of the whole thing that it is right now. So it's not like, again, it's not like migrant children were not being put into cages, in border, kind of like ICE detention centers. They weren't. It's not like that wasn't happening, but it just wasn't happening to the tune that it's happening now. That's what it seems to be the case. From what I've seen and from my research and whatnot, I could be wrong on that, but that's what I know. That's kind of what I've picked up from my research. So let me just read one last quote here. This is from, I think it's from Biden. The article says, more recently, Biden has played up the role of technology in securing the border from drugs. At an event in April of this year, Biden discussed the need to enhance technological capabilities at legal ports of entry and working with countries where some of these drugs originate, quote, instead of building more barriers. It says, so this is quoting Biden, says, I'm not being a wise guy about the wall and the president, all that, for real, my word. But instead of building more barriers, if it's drugs you're talking about, we can take 1/10 of the amount of money we're talking about building the wall and significantly increase the technological capability at legal ports of entry, because that's where 95% of all the stuff is coming through. So that from what I'm hearing from that quote, Joe Biden is still very, very, like I said before, he's very hardline on drugs. And there's no way, I just don't see it happening unless he's pushed by some kind of bill by Congress or the Senate, I mean, I don't see Biden, if he were president, pushing for any kind of legislation that would say, yeah, let's legalize, marijuana. Let's legalize, methamphetamines, opioids, all that stuff. Definitely not those other ones. I mean, anything past legalization of marijuana is outlandish. Like, anybody that wants to legalize anything other than marijuana, politicians are just like, what? How could you say that? That's terrible. Like, how can you be in favor of that? So marijuana, legalization of marijuana, I highly, highly doubt that would happen under a Joe Biden presidency. I just don't see it happening. The conversation would be out there. He would kind of float it, I think. I'm not saying the debate wouldn't take place. I'm not saying he wouldn't have to address it. But I just don't see him pushing for it. Now, I could be wrong. That's just my prediction. I'm just giving you the best prediction I can based on the track record and kind of the pattern of where the U.S. government has gone when it comes to, kind of like their view of these kind of different drugs obviously existing out there, and whether or not they're actually against getting rid, against them existing out there in the, out in the world, out there in the not the world, but out there in the, all over the country, So I mean, obviously, if you go to somewhere like Colorado or something, obviously they're going to be, it's going to be legalized there, and then I think So I think recreational marijuana is legal in California, the state that I live in. So that's good. So there are definitely a lot of states that are, coming out and being principled and supporting legalization of that one drug that is most well known and that people are becoming less scared of and not fear mongering about so much. But the legalization of that, the total legalization of that drug, is far from likely to happen, let alone any other drug. I mean, for Christ's sake, they've legalized marijuana in Canada. Canada, of all places. And we still can't get it legalized in a majority of the states in this country. Not even close. I think Colorado's the only one, right? Colorado, I believe, is the only state to legalize marijuana. And I'm talking about fully legalized. So they buy it, you purchase it, you can, all that stuff. So, no, it is legal in California too, right? Because we have pot stores here, but I think you have to have a prescription, I believe. I think in the state of California, you have to have a prescription to purchase marijuana products. So I have CBD oil. So I take a CBD oil and it helps me. It kind of helps me like sleep at night and stuff. So CBD oil it's obviously a very, useful thing. It's not as potent as marijuana as weed. So, again, I think, and I had to get a prescription for that. So, but that kind of stuff is legal. So I think as long as you have the prescription in California, you can get it. In Colorado, that's not the case. Colorado, you can go into any store, you can go into any marijuana, pot store, and you can get anything you want. You can get it any way you want. You don't have to have any kind of prescription. It's like going and shopping in a candy store, essentially. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the kind of the general debate of drug legalization. But don't expect Joe Biden. Don't expect any Democrats to take any solid stances on the issues on that issue, and I just think that's just overall that's a problem with the Democratic Party overall, because they just don't want to take a stance that they feel is not going to win over voters politically, and it's going to hurt them. So they're just thinking about it in a political sense, unfortunately, and that's what you have to come to expect with Democrats these days. So the next Joe Biden-related issue, or not even so much an issue, but Joe Biden-related topic I wanted to talk about here is the possibility that Biden wants to, I don't even know if it's Biden saying it, I think it's just like a lot of people just floating the idea, but apparently people are calling the idea of Joe Biden making Kamala Harris his VP. Apparently that's being floated as an idea. And a lot of Democrats and their loyalists in the party and, different voters out there, people on Twitter. I haven't seen a lot of people on Twitter mention it, but people on Twitter have been talking about how Kamala Harris, have been talking about. I'm sorry, they have not. I don't know if they've been talking about it on Twitter, but I'm sure there are a lot of loyalists that are talking about this kind of stuff. Talking about how Kamala Harris being on a ticket with Joe Biden would be a dream ticket, quote unquote. There was also another idea being floated before Joe Biden even declared, if I remember correctly, that Stacey Abrams, who was running for the governor of Georgia, where she pretty much got cheated out of that election. They completely rigged the race against. I forgot the name of the white dude that won. But anyway, so Stacey Abrams, she lost her rigged election essentially in Georgia for the governor of Georgia. And after that, they were talking about how, recently, less than a month ago or something, they were talking about how she would be on, it would be great for her to be on a ticket with Biden. So they were already floating. They've been floating these ideas constantly. So it's not anything new, but it's just like the Kamala Harris one to me is new because, this article just came out a couple days ago, I think. Yeah, it came out less than a week ago. So, but this is a new one. So let me just read through this article a little bit and just quote some of the people that are making their feelings heard about this idea. The title of the article is A Dream Ticket. Black lawmakers pitch Biden Harris to beat Trump. The subheadline says, some members of the Congressional Black Caucus say it's an ideal ticket if the former vice president stays atop the polls. The Congressional Black Caucus may have found an answer to its Joe Biden dilemma, Vice President Kamala Harris. Some black lawmakers are agonizing over whether to back Biden or two members of the close-knit caucus, Senators Harris and Cory Booker, who are also vying for the White House. According to interviews with a dozen CBC members, but with the former vice president jumping out to a huge, if early, lead in the polls, several CBC members are warming to the idea of a Biden-Harris ticket to take on President Donald Trump. That would be, quoting Representative Lacey Clay, a Democrat from Missouri, says, that would be a dream ticket for me. A dream ticket, says enthusiastically. If she is not the nominee, that would be a dream ticket for this country. Okay. It says Harris is everything the 76-year-old Biden is not. The freshman senator from California is younger, a woman, and a person of color. As Biden gets dinged for his bipartisan bromides, Harris is winning applause from progressives for her merciless cross-examination of Trump officials. Just to make a side note here, that's not progressives. Progressives are not applauding Kamala Harris for cross-examining Trump officials. Those are just a bunch of people that love Kamala Harris. They're loyalists to the Democratic Party. They love the idea of identity politics and the identity of any black female politician, or really any black politician, really. But in this case, female politician, getting bigger name status and possibly becoming president and all that stuff. And that's why a lot of people even love, I would say what I consider to be Democratic loyalists love Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who obviously beat Joe Crowley in New York over the, during the last midterms. So they like her a lot too, but that's only because she's a woman of color. They don't really care for like the fact that Ocasio-Cortez is not only backed by Bernie Sanders and a lot of actual progressives who they consider far leftists or whatever, which is us basically, but they only like her because she's a woman of color. She's Puerto Rican descent, I believe Ocasio-Cortez is. Yeah. So yeah, but it's all about really identity. It's all about identity politics. It doesn't have anything to do with actual policy substance, which is not surprising coming from Democratic loyalists and faux progressives. Continuing on here, it says Democrats are also desperate to boost black turnout in 2020, blaming the drop-off from Barack Obama's wins as one reason for Hillary Clinton's defeat. I don't know if that's necessarily true. It's not. That's true when it comes to maybe black male voters, so men of color. When it comes to women of color, though, they came out in droves for Hillary Clinton. Women of color loved Hillary Clinton in 2016, and that was the reason why Bernie Sanders couldn't beat her in a lot of the southern states, because the women of color were heavily supporting Hillary Clinton. What is this? This is a quote from Anthony Brown, a Democrat from Maryland. It says, "Either combination there I'd love. I think he's going to look to balance his ticket so that the ticket itself is more appealing. I think it would make sense, and it wouldn't surprise me if he picked a woman of color." It says, "No one in the caucus is declaring Biden the winner of a presidential race that has nearly 24 candidates and is still 9 months from the first primary contest. And Democrats cautioned that they're not counting out Harris or Booker and would be thrilled if either won the Democratic nomination. Both senators have actively courted members of the CBC. Yet there is no question that Biden, thanks in part to his close relationship with Barack Obama, is popular with African American voters, according to several polls since he entered the race. That support from within the black community translates into backing from black lawmakers as well. And it's very unfortunate that people think that they can, well, this old white dude has the seal of approval from the black community because the last black president chose him as his VP. I mean, is that really how shallow people are thinking? Like, can we not get any more, can we get a little bit more into the weeds a little bit, please? Instead of just assuming that, he's got the approval. Don't worry, he's got the approval of the last black dude that was president, so he's perfectly fine. So as if that's the rubber stamp right there. That gets you into the club of being loved by all black people, by all African Americans, by all people of color. I mean, honestly, if people are really that shallow, that's pretty pathetic. I mean, that's sad. Because that shouldn't have anything to do with, that should have I don't want to say anything, but that should have very little to do with people's decisions. Why not go based on the policies? So do you not know about Joe Biden? Joe Biden's being the chair of that committee regarding Anita Hill's testimony? Do you not know how he treated her, let alone let his colleagues treat her? Do you not know that he voted for the crime bill, and that the crime bill, as we mentioned in last week's episode, the crime bill was named after Joe Biden, and it was championed by Joe Biden. It was championed by then First Lady Hillary Clinton. Do you not know that he has supported those things? Do you not know that he's voted for basically every single endless war that we're involved in right now? Voted for or supported all of them? So how the hell is he a friend to black people? How is he a friend to minorities? How is he a friend to people of color and anybody that's not a white person? How is he a friend to you? I just don't get that. Why? Because Obama chose him. So that's it. Because Obama chose him, that's it. Automatically, that makes him the perfect option, the dream ticket with another black woman to be his VP. Which honestly, a lot of these people saying that that the blacks. I mean, if you want to use their logic against them, saying that a black woman of color, in this case, I mean, just to be specific, Kamala Harris is Jamaican, half Indian ethnicity. But okay, so she's a black woman of color. She's a woman of color. She's a minority. Isn't it a little bit presumptuous to assume that the black woman of color, even Stacey Abrams, whether it's Kamala Harris, any other black woman you want to choose, isn't it a little presumptuous to assume that black woman has to be the subordinate of the white man? Now, okay, you can make the case that Joe Biden is ahead in the polls. He's doing well in the polls. It's understandable that he's going to be, the nominee. And again, I'm not in favor of Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams to be president, to be VP. I'm just saying that if you want to take the position of the resistance and all these people that love the Democrats and fawn over every the kind of the blue no matter who people, the people that just want to vote Democrat across the board because they just support Democrats, they are supposedly in favor of the woman, black woman, whatever, white woman, but in this case a black woman being a top being the top person, being the person that's considered at the top of the ticket. But in this case, for some reason, they're okay with being so this in this case, Kamala Harris or whoever, Stacey Abrams, being at the bottom of it, being the secondary, being the subordinate to the presidential. I'm sorry, to the nominee, so the presidential nominee for that party, in this case the Democrats. So that's a little weird, and it's interesting because Stacey Abrams, when she was asked about this, I think she made like an appearance on The View or something somewhere, and she was asked about this. She was like, "Yeah, that's bullshit. I'm not going to be. If I'm going to be running for president, I'm running for president. I'm not running to be anybody's VP." So, I mean, I'm not really a big fan of Stacey Abrams because I heard Stacey Abrams joined the board of the Center for American Progress, which is just a progressive group, and they're like anti-Bernie Sanders, and they're just like bunch of neoliberals, pro-Hillary neoliberals. But she joined that board, so I'm not a big fan of Stacey Abrams in general. I definitely think that she got cheated in her governor's race in Georgia, but again, I mean, just on principle alone, I don't think it's right to just assume that this black woman, whether it's Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams or anybody else, deserves to be considered as like a subordinate to the people that they assume is going to be the nominee, in this case Joe Biden. So I think that's a little bit jumping ahead. Putting the cart before the horse there. Let's see. It says, so this is quoting Emanuel Cleaver, who's another Democrat from Missouri. But for the fact that we have two of our own who are both quite capable of being president, I'd say probably a lot of the members would have already announced for Biden. I'm assuming that he means two of our own, meaning Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. It says, I'd say probably a lot of the members would have already announced for Biden? What does that mean? So people are already supporting Biden? That's weird. Okay. It says, were Biden to prevail in the fight for the nomination, Harris would be many members' vice presidential pick. If Biden becomes the nominee, that certainly would be my choice, said Marcia Fudge, who is a Democratic from Ohio, a female Democrat from Ohio, a senior member of the caucus. Right now, I'm still believing that Harris can be the top of the ticket. Let's see. It says it would absolutely be a very strong ticket, no question about that. Fudge said 1 and 2, 2 and 1, either way it would be great. It says Biden has a deep well of support within the influential group of 55 black lawmakers, having served alongside many of them in his 36 years as a senator and 8 years as vice president under the first African-American president. Biden has already racked up some key endorsements within the caucus, including from former CBC chairman Cedric Richmond, who is the Democrat from, is that Louisiana? Yeah, Louisiana. It says House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, the highest-ranking African-American in Congress, often speaks fondly of Biden, a longtime friend, though Clyburn has said he won't endorse anyone before his home state's primary, which is South Carolina. He is a Democrat from South Carolina. Quoting Clyburn here, it says, I said a few weeks ago that if Biden were to get in, everybody else would be running for second place. I said that over a month ago, and he got in, and the polls said everyone else is running for second place. It should also be of no surprise that Biden is polling well among black Democratic primary voters, which is what Clyburn is noting. He says that, quote, the data are clear. I guess he means is. The data are clear that he has strong support among African Americans. It's just that simple. He's had that for a long time, and he's kept it steady so far. It says the CBC isn't expected to endorse in the Democratic race, although its political arm, CBC PAC, will likely wade into the crowded contest at some point. In the meantime, Biden, Harris, Booker, and other candidates are all wooing members of the CBC who have outsized influence with African American voters. It says Biden is a creature of Capitol Hill with relationships that go back decades with some of the most senior members of the caucus. He happily refers to his former boss, the first black president, as my, quote, my buddy Barack, end quote, on the campaign trail. I don't think people should underestimate the significance of this older white guy playing the role of second, a supportive second, to a younger man who is African American. And people felt this was real and authentic. Biden wasn't faking it. There was a real friendship there. Okay. I mean, he's not he's not the VP anymore. So I don't know why you're referring to it as if it's like right now. Quoting Emmanuel Kleber again here, it says, Biden is very comfortable in African-American circles. Sometimes a white politician in an all-black setting, you can feel the seed of nervousness. Kleber said, with Biden, he's just right at home. You can see it and feel it. It says something about how Joe Biden was in constant contact with CBC leaders and would host an annual dinner with the entire caucus at his house in observance of Black History Month. So basically, he was catering to them. He was sucking up to them. It says, quote from Val Demings, who's a Democrat from Florida. He called me before he made his announcement to fill me in, and I was honored that he would call me to let me know. And that person has yet to endorse anybody. It says Biden's already running as if he is the Democratic nominee. He took a picture with Kamala Harris. Yeah, I remember that. They were posing together. Let's see if it's the same one. They were posing together. Where was it? They were outside of somebody took some random picture of her. And outside, like from inside of a car, somebody was sitting inside of a car and took a picture of them, I guess. I don't know why. But it says, I don't know, it refers to Kamala Harris, him and Kamala Harris being friends or something. It says Trump commented on Joe Biden's candidacy, saying that, referring him to a Sleepy Joe or Sleepy Creepy Joe. For all of Trump's idiocy, he comes up with some funny nicknames. Yeah, it says Biden faced criticism after early reports he was eyeing former Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams as an early running mate. Abrams says she still considers seeking the top slot herself. So that's, like I mentioned, yeah, I didn't even know that. So I mean, so apparently he was already saying it. So he already, somehow he had made that statement, I guess, to somebody, and then it leaked, and then people put it out there, and then it came out. I thought other people were offering that as a possibility, just like they were with this Kamala Harris one. But apparently the Stacey Abrams one was floated out by Biden himself. One of the CBC members, so one of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, said it would be premature and likely would backfire if he was already choosing his vice presidential pick. It says the vice president's team seems to be very sensitive to the notion that they have to go out and earn this. That's very similar to Hillary Clinton. This is even worse than Hillary Clinton. Well, in some cases, I guess. But it's very similar to Hillary Clinton just assuming that she's wanted the nomination and that she's just going to fucking just easily get into the nomination and then easily beat Trump. Yeah, good luck with that. It says, the last quote here from the article, it says, this is from Al Green, who's a Democrat from Texas. It says, whomever the nominee is, I think there has to be a woman on the ticket, said Al Green, and I think it is time for an African-American woman to get that kind of consideration, whoever it happens to be. Yeah, so, I don't have a particular preference to whether a woman is a woman of color is on the ticket or not. I think that's largely irrelevant, because I don't think that when those decisions are made, I don't think it's made in good conscience. I just think it's done to cater to that specific group. So that's all they really want to do. Like, they just want to. So that particular candidate that says, I'm going to make this, black, female or black man or whatever, I'm going to make him my vice president, or I'm going to consider him in whatever, any kind of role, some kind of role. I think that's just catering to the idea of getting those people's votes. And like I said before, in an earlier segment that I was doing earlier, I think what Joe Biden and what really a lot of politicians want to do when they're choosing these vice presidential candidates is when they choose them to. So they choose, let's say they choose a black man, black woman. They choose that person to cater to the base. They cater to not so much the base, but they cater to that specific demographic of people of color and, people of color voters who, want that person to to push for policies that are more, in favor of what, the black community wants. But when it comes down to it, is that person that is president, regardless of what skin color or ethnicity they are they truly going to be pushing for policies that are in favor of the black community? I don't think so. I mean, look at Barack Obama. What did Barack Obama do for the black community? He didn't really do anything. He didn't. The only thing he really, and I think I mentioned on whether it was the last episode or the episode before that, but the only thing that I remember Barack Obama doing is he did, near the end of his term, he did release some nonviolent drug offenders who were black from certain, I don't know who, I don't know the specific details of it, but he did do that, and there was like a profile about it on Vice, I believe, and he did like an interview in like a prison, and then I think they were talking to a couple of the inmates or something. But yeah, apparently Barack Obama did do that, and he did that, and but like it was kind of like, to me at least, and I think to a lot of people in the black community, I think it was like a little too late. It wasn't like he could have done it a hell of a lot earlier. He could have done that much earlier. But for some reason, he just decided to wait till like the very end, and I think it was largely because he didn't want a lot of people to have time to scrutinize him for it. So he did it later, so that he didn't have to like hear from like the Republicans smearing him as like, well, you're sucking up to the black people, and you're going to create a lot of violence because black people are being released out into the society. Bunch of bullshit, bunch of racist bullshit from a bunch of idiotic racist right wingers. But I don't think just choosing a person of color on your ticket, whether it's a woman or a man, is going to fix anything. The people, again, it's a very shallow point of view to assume that just because you put that person on your ticket automatically means that you're going to be like, pushing for everything that the black community wants. All that does is just panders to the black community and makes them think that you're on their side, when in reality you're not on their side. And that takes me to my core point. It's the policy that matters. It's the policies that you're pushing for that are going to hurt people of color, that are going to help the black community, help Hispanics, help Asians, Middle Eastern people, any kind of ethnicity that's not white that you want to put out there. There's certain policies that's going to help them, and that takes me to the point that the larger point that Bernie Sanders' idea of helping the black community it doesn't seem to be something that either A, the black community supports, or B, the way it's reported that the black community supports it. And I have said before in the past that a lot of the all this hoopla about how the black community doesn't support Bernie Sanders, and they don't like what he stands for, and they don't think he's going to do what he wants, what they want on policies, and he's going to help them out. I mean, to me that's just bullshit, because they can't point to anything. So they can't point to anything where Barack Obama says like, yeah, I'm sorry, not Barack Obama, but Bernie Sanders says like, yeah, I don't care about black people. Like he's never, I don't care about black people issues. No, they're just like, all that stuff is just made up. That's just bullshit. It's just a bunch of bullshit to me, where they just want to. It's a matter of manufacturing consent, where the media portrays something to be the case when it's truly not, and it's just something that the media does to try and frame the debate and portray Bernie Sanders as just being like this curmudgeon old white man who doesn't give a shit about what black people are going through and what the struggles that they're suffering with, even though Bernie Sanders he marched with Martin Luther King. He has pushed for, he's pushed for, constant. So he's pushed for policies that would help the black community. He's pushed for raising the minimum wage. He's pushed for, allowing. So because apparently there's there's a large community there's a large part of the black community that is unable to get so women of color, so black women are unable to get treatment for like reproductive rights. So they have to go to a lot of a lot of Planned Parenthood clinics, and they have to go to the kind of clinics where they're going to get, like, for example, birth control, and they're going to get, be able to get pap smears, and let's say, if they want to get an abortion, they can get an abortion. If they want to, any kind of issues that have to do with like women's rights. Barack Obama has always been, I'm sorry, again, I keep saying Barack Obama. Bernie Sanders has always stood up for that, and he has pushed for policies that will help the black community. And like I was saying, as I was saying before I got into the part about kind of like women and kind of pushing for policies that help women, especially when it comes to reproductive rights. He has pushed for policies that advocate for women to get that kind of health care. So it's good because when women go to those kind of clinics that help with reproductive rights and birth control and all that kind of stuff, abortion or whatever, that involves poor communities. And unfortunately, a lot of them are black communities that are poor. And he's pushed for policies that would help those poor communities, because a lot of people, let's be honest, that unfortunately, a lot of people that are black and people of color, they are not able to afford healthcare. They're not able to afford going into a hospital, let alone to get a decent insurance plan to get treatment for something that they need regarding, like, again, like whether it's a pap smear, whether it's a ultrasound, all that kind of stuff. Let's say if a woman is pregnant and she wants to go get an ultrasound, she doesn't have the kind of money to go into a hospital or to get an insurance plan that is going to cover her. So she's got to go to a Planned Parenthood clinic. So again, Bernie Sanders has pushed for policies that support women's rights, that allow women to do those kind of things, so that they don't have to rely on a pricey insurance plan or kind of the for-profit health insurance industry to screw over women of color, so that they have to rely on those assholes to give them some sort of give them an important treatment that they want, so that they can rely on something like Planned Parenthood. And he's also pushed for, like I think I said before, pushing for a living wage, or raising the minimum wage, $15 minimum wage. He's pushed for these kind of things that, and a lot of people don't like it, but Bernie Sanders, he pushes for things so they kind of, it's kind of like a crossover between race and class. So a lot of the black community doesn't like that Bernie Sanders likes to kind of intertwine the existence of race and class, and say that, listen, people that are black are in a certain class, when they shouldn't be, really, but they are. But they're put into a certain class where, because you're black, you're poor, and you're black, you got to go live in Section 8 housing. You got to go live in a poor community. You got to go live like shit, essentially. While the rest of America, white America, essentially lives in a more kind of suburban community. It's more safer, and so it's it's just like, people of color are just not treated like human beings, And I think this was going back to way before. I think this was a point that was made by, I think, John Edwards, going all the way back to 2008, when I think John Edwards was running. He was actually John Kerry's vice presidential pick, but John Edwards made the point of two Americas, and he was pointing out the fact that there's two Americas, one. And I don't remember the specific argument that he made, but from what I remember, he was stating that there's two Americas, in the sense that there's the poor America and there's the rich America. And I think I can add to that by saying that there's the black America and there's the white America. And a lot of people have made that point before too, where those two, demographics, those two ethnicities, those two, sides are basically pitted against each other, and one is treated much better while the other one is treated like shit. And the black community is completely ignored. All the demands that they want, that they make, and the things that they want is ignored, while white America is just, they get away with everything, And there are figures that come out that have shown that that white Americans, so white people in America are actually selling and doing drugs at a higher rate than black people are in America. Yet, who are the people that got arrested more for doing drugs or selling drugs? Black people, even though they don't do it as much as white people. So that says a lot about how our politicians in this country have treated the issue of race relations, the issue of how black people are treated in this country, and a lot of it has been perpetuated by the likes of people that are similar to Joe Biden, or if not Joe Biden. I mean, he pushed for the fucking crime bill, for Christ's sake. I mean, this is a guy that was okay with imprisoning more black people, and he thought it was a perfectly fine thing to do because, like I played for a clip for you guys before, it was from, I believe it was last week or a week before that, he was talking about how we have to get all these predators off the street, these predators that are, hitting my wife over the head with a lead pipe and beating up my son and stuff. I think it was just total fear-mongering. It was a clip from 1991 or 1992 or something, 93, somewhere around when the crime bill was being debated. And he was just going on this total ridiculous fear-mongering rant and just scare this kind of like way to like scare regular white folk essentially and make them think that all these black people are out there to just beat everybody over the head with lead pipes and kill them and shoot them and rape them and all that stuff. So the last person I'm going to trust on when it comes to the issue of black issues and black relations and kind of bridging that gap between white and black America, the last person I'm going to expect to do that is Joe Biden, just based on his history. I mean, am I saying that Joe Biden is like this, like avowed racist, obviously white nationalist or anything? No, I'm not saying that. But his policies are definitely not aligned and in line with what the black community wants. I think honestly, if you ask 500 people in the black community, just any regular, let's say 250 women, 250 men, and you ask them, do you support Joe Biden for president? I would honestly venture to guess that I would think it would go down the line. And I think a lot of them would be in support of him because he was Barack Obama's vice president. And so he has that name recognition, but also has that recognition from our first black president. But I think the other ones, they would be like, yeah, like the younger demographic, I think, who are much more, I would say, informed, not the boomer generation who are, they're okay with like the older kind of politicians who are in favor of like old school policies, essentially, like Biden is. They would be in favor. So like the boomers would be in favor of Biden, whether they're black, whether they're white, whatever they are, Mexican, whatever. But whereas the younger generation of black people, whether they're men or women, I think they would be against Joe Biden. I think. And I mean, a lot of polls have shown that, at least a lot of the polls that I've seen, aside from a couple ones that were just ridiculously, oversampled with boomers, they claim, oh yeah, no, the younger demographic totally loves Joe Biden, even though they were oversampling boomers. So it was bullshit. But aside from what the media puts out there, it's obvious that the boomer generation would love Joe Biden, whereas the younger Gen X, I'm sorry, not Gen X, Gen Z, so the millennials, people my age, I'm 32 years old. People in my generation, they would definitely, if they're black, they would definitely like Bernie Sanders more. They would definitely like somebody like even Elizabeth Warren, maybe stuff like that. So like people that are more progressive. And trust me, I have my issues with Elizabeth Warren, but just to throw other names out there that I think black people would prefer, it wouldn't be Joe Biden. I think it would be other more actual progressive politicians that have actual policies that push for, things that would help the black community. Whereas I can't think of one single policy that Joe Biden has put out there that would help the black community at all. And all his other policies that he's pushed for have all been to the detriment of black people. So, I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. And if you want to look at the facts, that's what it is. So, the final topic I wanted to cover regarding Joe Biden here is actually a pretty funny one, because it's kind of, so it's Joe Biden just, again, making a fool of himself and just saying some stupid shit. But it's also the fact that Democrats do not learn from the past at all. To be honest, a lot of politicians don't learn from the past, or they just don't care. They know what what happened in the past, and they just ignore what happened in the past, and they just kind of ignore it and just go on with whatever they're doing, going on with the same shitty policies anyway. But the former Vice President Joe Biden was I don't know, he was some sort of, I think it was like a coffee shop or something. He was making, let me just check this here real quick. Apparently he was in New Hampshire, I believe. Okay, so I'm gonna play a clip for you guys in a second that will talk about how it's gonna show Joe Biden making a comment while he was in New Hampshire, and he, I don't know, had some fucking something stupid to say here. So I just thought I would show it to you guys here, and then I'll get on to reading about the article. So the article kind of addressing his comments. So here's a video of Joe Biden commenting on Republicans and how he feels he's going to be able to work with them if he were to become, president, if he were to get in, he were to get into the White House and, become obviously President Joe Biden. So let's see so this is actually a segment from MSNBC's Morning Joe. So let me play this clip for you guys real quick, and then we will discuss it on the other side and also read the CNN article about the comments that he made. Check it out.
Well, campaigning in New Hampshire, former Vice President Joe Biden said he believes Republicans will find their way back to working across the aisle after President Trump is out of office.
I just think there is a way, and the thing will fundamentally change things, is with Donald Trump out of the White House. Not a joke. You will see an epiphany occur among many of my Republican friends. And it's already beginning this year in the House now. You've seen people that, in fact, were not willing to vote for any Democratic initiative, even if they agreed with it, because they didn't want to be the odd person out if it wasn't going to pass. There's no sense in getting politically beaten for something that's not going to happen. Let me put it another way. If we can't change it, we're in trouble. This nation cannot function without generating consensus.
Wow. So much there that I'm glad he said. But, Joe, is it possible the fever will break? Because a lot of these Republicans have put a lot of core values, have crossed them, really, in order to stay with Trump. Will it go away?
It can. It certainly can. And it's interesting that talking about consensus, talking about bipartisanship, sounds like a radical message. That's how bad things have gotten in 2019. But Willie, if you get somebody who knows how Washington works, let's Bill Clinton, for instance. Bill Clinton was forced to support a lot of Republican initiatives that Bill Clinton didn't like because they were very popular. Everybody talked about the contract on America. Well, with contract with America, a lot of times we get a majority of Democrats voting for it because the way the issue was framed, they had no choice. Bill Clinton, after that, spent the rest of his term coming up with plans that Republicans could work with as well because he had governed for a very long time. And he also knew Washington, D.C. We've had people in the White House that haven't known how Washington works over the past 15, 20 years. And I think somebody like Biden actually has the ability to get things working in D.C. again. And I loved what he said at the end, which was, we have no choice. We're in trouble if we can't start working together again, Republicans and Democrats alike. That's a hopeful message. Americans want compromise. Americans want both sides talking with each other and working with each other, and that's Biden's message.
Okay, so hold on. Okay, so let me just comment on that real quick. So this is your typical establishment show here, Morning Joe, on MSNBC, which pushes that idea of how everybody has to work together, everybody has to come together, everybody has to compromise for the betterment of the country. This is a ridiculously false narrative. That's not what these, so people hear that and they're like, yeah, that's actually not a bad idea, right? Everybody has to work together. Everybody has to work together and come together for the betterment of the country because all these radical positions are not working. Okay, so, I mean, obviously that radical part of the radical, the radical part is stupid. But when it comes to these people that are talking about the idea of compromise and how wonderful it is, and Joe Scarborough saying it's a dirty word, or it's like, it seems like a radical thing to say. No, nobody is saying that compromise is like off the table and it shouldn't be done. We're talking about the fact that when it comes to compromising, what we do is a lot of times we end up giving away a lot of the stuff that people already support. So for example, to just use one thing as an example that I've used many times, is the fact that both parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, are in favor of entitlement cuts. And they've, when President Obama was president, he was pushing constantly. He was constantly pushing for, putting in, possibly cutting entitlements. If he wasn't pushing it, he was definitely like discussing the issue, and he was using the same GOP kind of right-wing framing of like, well, we need to save Social Security and Medicare. We need to save these programs before they go bankrupt because we want to keep them in existence, and we can't have them going away anywhere. We can't have them going away and not have any more of it, which is just that's also another bullshit narrative. But that's just one issue where people. So when it comes to doing that, that's just ridiculous. I mean, cutting entitlements, cutting Social Security and Medicare is just an absurd idea, and it's only more of a way for the super rich to get more cutback. So for example, what you do is let's say if you cut Social Security and Medicare, and then you what they claim is what the politicians like to claim, like, oh, we're gonna save it for the the betterment of the future. No, what they're doing is they're cutting those government programs, so taking money out of those government programs, out of those entitlement programs, and they're going to give it more. They're going to shift it into more tax cuts to the rich. That's their whole plan. That's the whole plan behind the kind of the establishment and certainly the Republican narrative for sure, and what Democrats a lot of times give into, which is just kind of like a so-called compromise of the establishment. In reality, it's not compromise. Again, it's not compromise. This is an issue which involves screwing over the American people, screwing over regular people who are getting, honestly, when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, getting the bare minimum when it comes to benefits. You're getting enough just to stay alive. And these are very popular programs. So when they're cutting them because they are popular. The government, the politicians, the establishment is cutting them because it's benefiting Republicans. It's benefiting regular people, whether it is Republicans or Democrats. Republicans and both Democrats love Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, all that stuff. They love these entitlement programs because it keeps them alive, especially the older people. Which is why a lot of people in the progressive community, like myself, were pushing for Medicare-for-all, because Medicare is a very popular program, and it's a government program, and we want it to expand to all people. That's a different topic for another day, and we've obviously talked about that a lot, and we might talk about that later on in the show today. But to stick to my point, when it comes to the whole idea of compromise and working together, that's done to screw over regular people. That's all it is. So when Joe Scarborough on his establishment show on MSNBC, the so-called liberal network, when he talks about this kind of stuff, he's just talking about stuff that's going to screw over people. And then Joe Biden talking about how actually, you know what? I'm going to get to that in a second. So I'll get to the stupid epiphany point in a second when it comes to what Biden said. So let's just continue on with the rest of the segment here.
Yeah, and Biden was criticized by many progressives for saying that. Some people thinking he sounded naive in the age of Trump, thinking that all these Republicans who pledged fealty to the President of the United States over the last couple of years might actually come back and work together with Democrats someday. But if that's not possible, what are we doing here? And I think that's sort of the point that Joe Biden was trying to make. And as you say, he's been doing it for 36 years or so in the United States Senate and then as vice president.
So did you notice how they scoffed at the fact that progressives, oh dear God. I mean, these people, they're so out of touch with regular people in this country. These establishment hosts, pundits, like they sneer, they scoff at, like, oh my God, progressives not being in favor of compromise. How dare you? Like, yeah, what we're pissed off about is that we can't stand the fact that Joe Biden wants to. I'll just get into the epiphany point right now. So the whole fact that Joe Biden is talking about how Republicans are going to have an epiphany, and all of a sudden the clouds are going to open up, the sun is going to shine through. All the Republicans are going to realize that this world is wonderful with Joe Biden as president, and Donald Trump is gone, and they're just going to suddenly want to work with Democrats, and everybody is just going to get along. It's going to be kumbaya. That is complete bullshit. Nobody fucking believes that. If you have a fucking brain, you have one remaining brain cell in your head, there's no way you believe that. I mean, even Republicans, even the right-wing conservatives and the Trump supporters, not even they'll be like, yeah, Joe Biden, totally right. We're totally going to work with him, and we're going to want to be on his side, and we're going to want to do what he's doing. We're going to listen to Joe Biden because he's totally got a lot of great things to say. These are the same people that hated Barack Obama and wanted to do again. They want to oppose everything Barack Obama did. They filibustered. I'm sorry. They pushed for. They filibustered. So every single thing, like piece of legislation that Barack Obama wanted to do, the Senate wouldn't. The Senate, well, not so much the Congress, but when it came to the Senate, they couldn't get anything passed because they didn't want to allow anything to get passed. When it came to any kind of even remotely liberal or progressive piece of legislation that Barack Obama or anybody in the Senate was pushing for, Mitch McConnell just said, fuck you, we're not going to push for that because we're Republicans and we oppose everything this Democrat's going to say. But all of a sudden, because Joe Biden is gonna become president, he's going to change things. He was the vice president under Barack Obama. So why would all of a sudden he becomes president and Republicans, because they hate Trump, I guess, they're going to all of a sudden be on Joe Biden's side? This was the party that tried to repeal Obamacare over 65 times, more than 60 times for sure. And all of a sudden they're going to realize that they want to work with Joe Biden? I mean, come on, man. There's no way Joe Biden can. I mean, either he's stupid or he's just blowing smoke. He's just saying something just to say it, just to get people on his side and pretend like, yeah, Republicans, me and the Republican Party, we can totally be best buddies and work together for making this country great. No, that's not true. We need to get rid of assholes like you, Joe Biden, and we need to get rid of those right-wing Republicans who want to destroy this country. Not that Joe Scarborough or Mika Brzezinski gives a fuck about that. Those assholes with their fucking, cushy jobs, making however many millions of dollars they're making every fucking, year, they don't give a shit about what you or me or anybody else in this country is going through. They don't give a shit about the people that are going to lose their Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, if they're going to get screwed over by Wall Street, if the economy is going to crash and they're going to be left on the fucking street. They don't give a fuck about that. They just want their best friend, their buddies in the establishment to have a better life because they're in the establishment. So they're in the establishment. They want everybody else in the establishment with them to get the same fucking benefits they're getting. So let's continue the clip here.
Amna, you were in Iowa last week talking to voters. It's 9 months out from those caucuses. I understand you interviewed Castro and O'Rourke, two candidates obviously running to become president. But what did you find as you talked to voters more broadly about what exactly they're looking for? Are they thinking about Donald Trump? Are they thinking about who can beat him? Or do they have specific issues that they want to sort of check boxes with each candidate? Or are they just sort of still testing the waters?
It's really interesting because the head of the Iowa Democratic Party there basically said, look, we stopped trying to keep up with all the candidates coming through. Like, if we hear about them coming through and we can act like the welcome wagon, great. But the pace of candidates coming through Iowa is already working at such a clip. And the voters there that we talked to, who, by the way, consisted of also, self-identified Democrats, but also Republicans and independents who said that they would be open to voting for a Democrat this time, caucusing for a Democrat in the caucuses, and potentially even voting down the line in a general election because they've become unhappy with the Republican Party so far. There are a few things they're looking for at this stage, right? And you know as well as I do, Iowa voters take themselves very seriously. Their responsibility is that first nominating contest. So they ask a lot of very specific questions that run the gamut. Healthcare, campaign finance, national security, immigration. I saw both O'Rourke and Castro at work in action, taking questions across all of those issues. But the number one thing that all the voters I talked to said that they want to see among the Democratic presidential candidates right now is civility. They said lessons learned from 2016. We want to see these guys talk about the issues. We want to see them talk about what they would do if they were elected. At the same time, there's a tension there because the next thing that they say they want to see in someone they could support is someone who could beat Donald Trump. And so those two things are going to have to come into conflict at some point. Right now, they're just kind of kicking the tires and seeing where everyone stands.
All right. So, largely that last part was pretty lame. I didn't really even have to play that. I just wanted to see what the rest of that segment was going to be. But the one part about how, largely the part about talking about Iowa caucus voters and stuff, oh yeah, there's Republicans that are going to be in favor of voting for the Democratic candidate. That's the same exact thing that was being talked about in 2016. A lot of people were just, a lot of the media and shit, a lot of the Hillary supporters were like, yeah, totally. The people that don't, the never Trumpers, the people that don't like Donald Trump, they're totally going to be in favor of Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton is civil. She's so nice. She smiles all the time and she's not yelling and screaming. Okay. So if you want to make that argument regarding Trump being a prick and he's an asshole and he yells a lot and he calls people names. Okay, fine. I understand people how that might turn people off. But when it comes to the general idea of being angry, there's nothing wrong with being angry and being a politician. And again, the one person that shows that anger, but also shows a lot of passion is Bernie Sanders. When it comes to somebody that captures the essence of why people in this country are angry, it's Bernie Sanders. It's somebody that understands that, listen, man, people in this country are getting fucked over. We're getting screwed. Whether it's the income inequality gap being fucking widened like the Red Sea, whether it's, people being, 45,000 people, dying from, lack of decent health care, essentially, from, people making not slave wages, but basically, you're making shitty wages, essentially. You have to work, 2, 3, 4 jobs sometimes just to make ends meet, just to keep the lights on. So Bernie Sanders understands these issues. He understands that these things are happening. He points these things out. So listen, it's not going over the head. But what Bernie Sanders says is not going over the head of Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski and all these pundits on CNN and MSNBC and all that stuff. These people know what Bernie Sanders is saying, but in their mind, they don't relate to that. They don't relate to that point of view, that lifestyle of living that shitty lifestyle. So to them, it's like, well, you're mentioning all these things that I'm sorry, it doesn't compute. In my fucking brain full of rocks, and this my head full of rocks, it doesn't compute. I haven't gone through situations where I've been in poverty. I haven't gone through situations where I've had to work multiple jobs. Like I said before, these people work cushy jobs. They make millions of dollars. They go in front of a fucking teleprompter and just repeat a bunch of bullshit while the rest of them just repeat talking points from whatever, politicians or parties they're part of, politicians they love or parties they're part of. or whatever lobbying group or whatever the hell they're part of, network, their channel they're part of. So whatever talking points or narrative they have to push, they push that. That's their job. The rest of us have to go out there. I have to go do a podcast. All the people that a bunch of people that I know in the progressive community, they have to go do podcasts. They have to make a living off this shit. Everybody else has to go work in a McDonald's. They have to go work at a, at a clothing store. They have to go, they got to go work in retail. They have to go, they have to go, maybe they have to go to school so that they can get a better education. I have a friend that's currently putting herself through a master's program so that she can get into the field of psychology, because she knows that a bachelor's degree can't do it. Now I have a bachelor's degree, but I'm having trouble finding a job myself. And, I can't really, I don't see anything else that I'm passionate about other than this. So talking to you guys, talking to camera, 3 different cameras right now, I enjoy this shit a hell of a lot more than I do going and working for some asshole that's going to be yelling at me and telling me what to do all the time. Sorry, that's just not what I like to do. But my point is that because of the kind of country that we're living in and the kind of policies that are passed by different corrupt politicians, we're forced to do these kind of things that, conventionally, it's not a conventional thing to go and do a podcast. But if you're passionate about it, that's great. You go and do it. The conventional thing is, you got to go and get a 9 to 5. Now, that's not something I want to do. But if you have to make ends meet, you have to do one or the other. So if you're good at going and talking in front of a camera and doing a podcast and making money off of it and all that stuff, which is what I'm trying to do, then I'm going to do it. If I want to go and work, maybe I want to go do this and also do a side job on the side, then that's another thing I can do. So there's different alternatives. But my general point is that it's not. You can go talk to all the Iowa caucus voters you want, but those people are not representative of the entire country, let alone the fact that you're going to talk to some people that are going to be outraged by some, cursing from Donald Trump or from anger from Bernie Sanders or whatever. So, what as if Joe Biden has never gotten angry before? So, if people think that Joe Biden is going to be the answer because maybe he doesn't sound as angry, I don't know. But that doesn't, when I showed you the clip before of him, talking so loud and yelling and shit when he was in that Rotary Club and was talking about immigration, he sounded pretty angry there. So there's nothing wrong with sounding angry. Joe Biden wants to sound angry, he can sound angry for all I care. That doesn't matter to me. I could care less how much he yells. But the overall point is that you have to focus on the policies. What are the policies that these politicians are pushing for? What are the things that they are focusing on? If they are going out there and pushing for things that are going to screw over regular people, I can't support that. Why would I? I'm a progressive. I'm a populist. I support policies that help regular people. If I'm going to go support, compromising with the Democrats, compromising and working with each other to screw over regular people, and again, it's not actual compromising. If it's being done just to screw over regular people, but it's being portrayed as compromising, then I don't support that. So fuck you and fuck off, and anything that you want to do that's going to be doing the same shit that we've already seen, then I'm just not in favor of that. Sorry, that's not something I can back. So just to kind of go over again with what. So the whole kind of epiphany comment with Joe Biden, it says, so the article here says Joe Biden predicts a post-Trump epiphany for Republicans, just as you saw in the statement that he made in that segment I just played. It says former Vice President Joe Biden predicted Tuesday that Republicans will have an epiphany and start working with Democrats once President Donald Trump is out of office. He says the thing, again, I'll quote him again, it says the thing that will fundamentally change things is with Donald Trump out of the White House. Not a joke, Biden told reporters at a diner in Concord, New Hampshire. You will see an epiphany occur among many of my Republican friends. It says the comment is the latest demonstration of Biden's effort to clash with Trump directly while also appealing to moderate Republicans. Wow. To the same exact thing Hillary Clinton did, showcasing a broad appeal that could help him win a Democratic-dominating contest in which voters are more concerned than usual with candidates' perceived electability. But it also highlights a major rift within a 2020 Democratic primary field in which other candidates, particularly Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, are casting Trump as just a symptom of a GOP and a government now controlled by special interests. Warren, in her campaign kickoff speech in February, said Trump is just the latest and most extreme symptom of what's gone wrong in America. Sanders said in an Iowa rally earlier this year that the stakes of the campaign are not just about defeating Donald Trump. It says the reaction to Biden's comments from the more liberal quarters of the party also illustrated skepticism to his candidacy from progressive activists and voters. Quoting the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, they made a statement. They said the real change isn't coming from epiphanies by Mitch McConnell and other corrupt Republican politicians, but from all of us organizing for change together. Just like his support of NAFTA, a middle ground on the existential climate crisis, this epiphany comment is the latest example of Joe Biden operating in an insider world of yesteryear, and shows that he is our worst foot forward in the general election. Biden acknowledged the tension with other Democrats later Tuesday at a House party in Nashua, New Hampshire. He says, we're in a situation now, folks, where I don't agree with my friends, and we've got a lot of good people running who say, no, that's old-time politics. He further says, we have to unify this country. Our political system is broken. It's flat broken. And folks, everybody tells me, no, that's naive. That's the old days. Well, if that's the old days, guess what? We're in deep, deep trouble because nothing can happen in this country in consequence without consensus. That's how the system was built. It says... Biden's remarks are also at odds with other comments Biden has made. He, for years, has criticized the GOP in broader terms. This is not your father's Republican Party is a go-to line he has used. Yeah, I've heard that. He has used for at least a decade, aiming at Tea Party Republicans in 2010, Mitt Romney in 2012, GOP midterm candidates last year, and Trump-era Republicans as recently as Monday in New Hampshire. But Biden's prediction of a GOP epiphany follows several instances in which he has described Trump as an aberration, as long as his tenure in office is limited to 4 years. That's definitely not true. What Biden is expressing is similar to an unfulfilled hope of former President Barack Obama's first term. And this highlights how Barack Obama says, when we are successful in this election, the fever may break because there's a tradition in the Republican Party of more common sense, Obama said in 2012 after years of Tea Party opposition. So obviously, basically what Biden is doing, he's just repeating the same sentiment that was put out, by Barack Obama 7 years earlier. So obviously, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, a very ignorant opinion. A very ignorant statement that you just think the Republicans are just going to, agree with everything Democrats or most of what Democrats want to do because it's for the good of the country. So the fact that Biden is just repeating Obama just shows how stupid they both are, honestly. Obama was definitely an idiot back then for thinking that, and for Biden to think it now too. So he's just repeating the same exact thing, dude. That was 7 years ago. Why would you think anything would be different just because of Trump? If anything, the Republicans in many cases are digging their heels. The Republican voters certainly. I don't know about the politicians. Maybe the members of the establishment don't care for Trump as much, but they still support his policies. Even a lot of the Republicans that are kind of so-called anti-Trump, even McCain in many cases. Jeff Flake, I remember, was another one. These guys, they may not like Trump, but they definitely don't disagree with his policies. They go agree with a lot of his policies. So here it says, Democrats critical of Biden's comments say he is ignoring the political realities of the last decade, including his time as vice president, in which GOP leaders sought to block all of Obama's legislative priorities and prevented him from filling a Supreme Court vacancy. That's part of why he has faced criticism for the characterization from veterans of the Obama administration, including the founders and hosts of the popular Pod Save America podcasts. And that's just a guy that's just saying that, how could you believe that this is true? Blah, blah, blah. It says days ago, Mitch McConnell offered a similarly critical take on a future Democratic president's prospects for working with Republicans on Capitol Hill. He says, no matter how they choose to characterize themselves, you can bet whether it is Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, or somebody else, the nominee for president on the Democratic side is going to be on a path to turn America into a socialist country. He said in an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity, we are not going to let that happen. So that's the end of that article. So I mean, Biden saying that, first of all, Biden saying that, and then, going and reading the end of, the end of that article where McConnell says basically, whether it's Biden, Bernie Sanders or whoever else, it's, the Democrats are going to push for socialism. So what happened to that fever breaking? You make that comment about the epiphany and the fever breaking or whatever. I mean, he didn't say it. That's what Obama said. But that whole kind of epiphany thing, is like, that whole idea of the epiphany thing is completely debunked by the fact that Mitch McConnell still to this day doesn't want to work with Democrats. So I don't even know what is. Biden is just he's such a dunce. He comes off as obviously he's just like that typical, everybody knows him as like Uncle Joe, but he's just like, he's kind of like your idiotic Uncle Joe at like the dinner table on like Thanksgiving. He's just a moron. And he just doesn't seem to understand the real problems that are going on. He just believes that, Republicans are going to just agree with him all of a sudden on things. So that just takes me to, another article. I'm not going to read the entire article, but I just wanted to quote somebody else that is repeating the sentiments of Mitch McConnell is Vice President Joe Biden. I'm sorry, Vice President, not Joe Biden. So Joe Biden's, Vice President Joe Biden's successor, which is Mike Pence. So Mike Pence is currently the Vice President under Donald Trump, and he is a extremely, extremely right-wing former member of Congress, former governor. I don't think he was in the Senate ever. So he has been all over politics. He was in the Tea Party when the Tea Party was in its kind of in its heyday, essentially, when they first came out, kind of first came out and got recognized. Mike Pence was back in everything they were doing. He was being backed by the Koch brothers, just like the Tea Party, all the other Tea Party politicians were. So he was a part of that movement from the beginning. So look at a quote here from the CNBC article. He says, "I think the choice that we face in this country today is a choice between freedom and socialism." Let's see. He says the vice president touted Trump as an advocate for policies including lower taxes and regulations and better fair trade deals. Yeah, right. And then, the rest of the article just kind of details how he's like basically shitting on Biden and saying he doesn't believe that Biden is going to be decent at all, even though the article itself said that Biden is a centrist and he's not. He works with Republicans constantly, so he's not going to push for any kind of socialism like McConnell and in this case Pence believe. Further quoting him, he says, "While we hear one of the latest candidates for president say that China doesn't represent a competition of the United States, they're half of our international trade deficit, and forced technology transfers and intellectual property theft are a reality. I think President Trump remains." It says the Trump administration has been locked in what suggests are the final stages of negotiations with China on reshaping the trade relationship between the world's two economies. And Pence is just commenting, saying that he remains hopeful that they can come to a trade deal. But apparently, Biden made some comments regarding trade and regarding the fact that China, Biden doesn't believe that China is a big, opponent on when it comes to trade deals and when it comes to like kind of having a trade war, because we're currently having a trade war with China. So apparently, I don't know, Biden was kind of poo-pooing that and saying that it doesn't really exist. Obviously that's untrue, and again, there's more proof that Biden is an idiot, but also, buttressing the point that just like Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence doesn't believe the Democrats are going to be, in their mind, fair, or in their mind working with them. They're just going to think that they're all socialists and they're all communists and they're all left-wingers and all this other stuff, and that anybody that even dares to push for like even a cent of a tax hike, they're going to call them a socialist, and they're call them all these different stupid-ass political labels. Well, not stupid-ass political labels, but like baseless political labels that are not really, they're not really like, that's not really true of that person. So if you want to see an actual socialist or communist, you're definitely not going to be looking at Democrats. They're never going to get anywhere close to that, let alone the fact that Obama was never even close to that, and they still call him that. So Yeah, this just shows that Biden is naive and ridiculous, and he just doesn't get it. And the fact that you see pundits like Joe Scarborough and all these morons, scoffing at the idea, like, how dare you, want to work with the Republicans? Yeah, because the Republicans want to screw us over, just like in many cases Joe Biden wants to screw us over. But somehow Joe Biden thinks he knows better. These pundits, these people in the establishment think they know better. They think everything is just going to be, it's going to be rainbows and unicorns when Joe Biden becomes president, and Republicans are going to want to work with him all of a sudden. So it's ridiculous, and I can't stand the kind of attitude these people have whenever we oppose what they want to do, which is just the same shit as usual. The business as usual. So I wanted to discuss a couple more things here. There was a really interesting article that came out, and it was actually a very scary article in a way, but it just shows how the establishment, as we've talked about on this show, as we always talk about, the establishment is totally, completely, utterly in the tank to screw over progressives, to screw over regular people, more importantly, regular people, but their so-called push for, decent healthcare policy and decent healthcare, initiatives in this country is just bullshit. And I wanted to read you guys an article here. It's from The Intercept. The author is Li Fang. I'm sorry, I still don't know how to say his name. Li Fang, though, he's a very, very good journalist at The Intercept. And the title of this article that he wrote here is called "Lobbyists Working to Undermine Medicare-for-all Host Congressional Staff at Luxury Resort." And it's like a view of, what is it called? Salamander Resort. It's in Virginia, in a spa. It's a resort and spa in Middleburg, Virginia, which is near Washington, D.C., obviously. So it says, I'm going to read parts of this article here. It says, at a luxury resort just outside of the nation's capital last month, around 4 dozen senior congressional staffers decamped for a weekend of relaxation and discussion at Salamander Resort and Spa. It was an opportunity for Democrats and Republicans to come together and listen to live music from the Trailer Grass Orchestra, sip surprisingly impressive glasses of Virginia wine, and hear from healthcare lobbyists focused on defeating Medicare for All. It says the event was hosted by a group called Center Forward and featured a lecture from industry lobbyists leading the charge on undermining progressive healthcare proposals. Center Forward was originally known as the Blue Dog Research Forum. They were smart to change that name because blue dogs are obviously known as corporate Democrats. A think tank affiliated with the conservative Blue Dog Coalition of House Democrats. The coalition has pressed the caucus to oppose social welfare spending, taxes on the wealthy, and regulations on business. So basically, they're just like Republicans. It says the organization's website is filled with bromides about giving centrist allies the information they need to craft common sense solutions that paper over an agenda designed to enrich powerful corporations. Center Forward's big idea on Medicare Part D, for instance, is to maintain lobbyist-authored provisions of the law that bar the government from bargaining for lower prices for medicine. Such restrictions cost taxpayers and patients as much as $73 billion a year, while boosting the profits of drug makers. So basically, you're just sucking up to the insurance industry and the insurance lobby, essentially. So they basically obviously don't want lower prices, so they lobby against that. So such restrictions, let me just read this part again. Such restrictions cost taxpayers and patients as much as $73 billion a year while boosting the profits of drug makers. Center Forward endorses the idea with the testimonial from Mary Greeley, a lobbyist for a trade group that represents pharmaceutical companies. The retreat held the weekend of held the weekend of April 5th to the 7th in Middleburg, Virginia, and continued center forward's approach. It says the schedule shows that the healthcare discussion was led by Center Forward board member Liz Greer, a lobbyist at Forbes Tate. The firm manages the Partnership for America's Healthcare Future Coalition, designed to undermine healthcare Medicare-for-all. Paul Kidwell, a lobbyist from the Federation of American Hospitals, and Larry Levitt from the Kaiser Family Foundation also spoke. No proponents of Medicare-for-all were included. Big surprise. Kidwell's trade association is part of the Partnership for America's Healthcare Future group opposing single payer. By the way, the what is it called again? The Partnership for America's Healthcare Future it's basically a group that is fighting single payer and Medicare for all, and they have a Twitter account, and they're just like constantly putting out all these like ridiculous like anti-Medicare for all takes, and just like all like at least from a couple of the tweets that I've seen, like their shit gets ratioed big time. So like obviously a lot of progressives see this and they ratio the shit out of this account who makes these like absurd talking point, puts out these absurd talking points and makes these arguments that are just bullshit, obviously. So yeah, it's funny. And then I remember there was a parody account that's called, I think it's Parasites for America's Healthcare Future, and it changes partnership to parasites. So it's basically like mocking the fact that obviously these pricks are screwing over regular people and they're parasites. And yeah, so I also wanted to point out this other part that says it points out the people, so the politicians. So not only the politicians, but the staffers that were involved, but the politicians that attended this event. It says several aides, Democratic leadership filled disclosures showing that they received paid travel to attend their Center Forward retreat, including chiefs of staff to Majority Whip James Clyburn from Democrat of South Carolina, and Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, Democrat of Maryland. The retreat included chiefs of staff to leading centrist Democrats, including Representatives Kurt Schrader, Democrat of Oregon, Dan Lipinski, Democrat of Illinois, and I have no idea how to say this name. Cocktail? Sorry, I don't know how to say it. Cocktail Torres Small, a Democrat from New Mexico. Officials from the Blue Dogs, Problem Solvers Caucus, and the New Democrats were also in attendance. Let's see. It says, unlike the previous branding of Blue Dogs, who were once built a big tent designed to bring conservative ideas into the Democratic Party, the centrist push now explicitly includes Republicans, senior aides to Reps Sean Duffy from Wisconsin, Rodney Davis from Illinois, Will Hurd from Texas, all attended the retreat as well. So it's it's a bipartisan. It's good to know that it's a bipartisan event, so it's not just Democrats, but that's still pretty bad. Obviously, because Republicans and Democrats are palling around and basically getting together to screw over regular people and fight against Medicare for all because they're so scared of it. It says the Ethics Committee rules bars registered lobbyists from arranging luxury travel for Congress. Although Center Forward's board is made up of almost entirely of registered corporate lobbyists, the event forms were signed by the group's executive director, Corey Kramer, who is not a registered lobbyist, a technicality. So, yeah, a technicality that helped elide the prohibition on lobbyist-funded travel. So basically, they skirted the rules to get that person to be, I guess, part of that. Yeah, to be part of that event, and then kind of help lobby all these politicians. But she's not technically a lobbyist. It says the forms show the group spent as much as $560 per congressional aide for transportation, food, and lodging. The host list speaks for itself, said Wendell Potter, president of Business Initiative for Health Policy. This event wasn't about fixing the healthcare system. It was about protecting the healthcare industry, no matter the cost to the patients, families, workers, or employers. The industry is the root cause of our healthcare crisis. A congressional staffer serious about finding solutions wouldn't touch that retreat with a 10-foot pole. So yeah, Wendell Potter is a very he's a great guy. He's a great healthcare reform advocate. He's been around forever. He was actually I think he was a former like executive or something of a health insurance company. So he was basically in the business of helping screw over people that were like trying to get health insurance and trying to, they were part of some sort of, pharmaceutical, plan or health insurance plan or something. Like, they had some sort of, obviously they were paying to be part of that company's, health insurance, and then he would help screw over and kick people off those plans. So, and then after that, at some point he became kind of obviously disillusioned and disgusted with what this company and many of the other companies were doing. So he essentially became a whistleblower, and he came out and he spoke out against these companies and said that, obviously these companies, what they're doing is horrible. I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. I feel disgusted. I feel horrible about what the things I'm doing to people. And, it's good to see. And he's been around forever. He was going, I remember he was back when I was watching, MSNBC when it was decent. And he was going on shows like Countdown with Keith Olbermann. He was talking to Keith Olbermann many times and kind of discussing his experiences when he was, part of that that specific, I forgot which company it was, but that specific health insurance company. And, he's a great guy. And he seems to be these days. I don't hear from him that much, but I'm sure he's a big time progressive, and he probably meets regularly like progressive, politicians and groups and stuff. I'm sure he's met with Bernie Sanders and stuff. So that's good to see. But yeah, man, this article is scary though. The fact that they can get just like a few staffers and a few politicians to come on these retreats and wine and dine them, giving, what was that? It said $560 for like every congressional staff or congressional whatever politician or staff or whatever. $560 is nothing. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket for these people, and that's why. I mean, they're able to bribe them essentially. In this case, well, obviously it's a bribe, but like they're able to buy them off for like the smallest tiny amount just to get them to a retreat, and then in that case they can, basically get them on board to push for these policies that are obviously horrible and, screwing over regular people. And I mean, Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk was, he mentioned this when he was talking about this article, but he said that Richard Ojeda, who was a former Republican and former Trump voter, he ran for the Democratic nomination for a congressional seat in West Virginia. Was it what? Yeah, West Virginia. And he made a proposal. Kyle was mentioning it. He was talking about how he made the proposal about how, I think it was either the politicians or the lobbyists, one of them, have to wear a body camera whenever they meet. So whenever a politician and a lobbyist meet, I guess, I don't know, he said the lobbyist should wear a body. They should make that the law. So that would be a great idea. Like, because then what would you expect to happen in a conversation between a lobbyist and a politician? Because remember, a lot of these conversations that happen between these lobbyists and politicians, they're covert conversations. They're kept secret. Nothing is let out. Nobody really hears about the details of it, obviously, other than, unless, somewhere to do a report on it, and just, that lobbyist or that politician would give like very minimal details. But imagine what would happen if there was a body camera on one of those, people, or on both of them, whatever, and you could hear their conversation. Obviously, they wouldn't want the details of that conversation to get out, so they would obviously make sure to, not say the certain things they would want to say. They obviously wouldn't want to have that body camera on them. So they would never discuss those kind of, the kind of ways that they're fucking over people, and, the kind of things that they're saying in reality, they're saying it in secret. They wouldn't say it in front of a camera. So, I mean, and I would, to be a fly on that wall, to hear those conversations that a lobbyist and a politician are having, I mean, or even a lobbyist and the, a staffer for a politician, whatever lobbyist, whatever these dirty ass fucking lobbyists are saying, I would love to hear what they're saying when they're pitching their, ideas to screw over people and to push for these awful policies that, they're obviously unpopular, but it's popular among, politicians. Obviously unpopular among regular people, but among politicians, they're like, hell yeah, you want to give me, you want to bribe me with, this deal? Yeah, here's a, I don't know, a couple $1,000 I can give you, or let's do a fundraiser or something, just so you don't vote in favor of Medicare for all, or you try and kill Medicare for all, or, don't push for any kind of reform, or you push for keeping Obamacare the way it is, because Obamacare obviously is still a huge giveaway to the insurance companies. So yeah, it's pretty sad how easily it is to buy off these politicians. So it wasn't good enough to just buy them off just with financial contributions and fundraisers. No, now they're taking them to resorts and they're kissing their ass and they're letting them stay in like these luxury hotels and shit. Like, that's, wow. I mean, you gotta be a fucking sucker to fall for that kind of, like, you're that desperate to like get wined and dined that you're just gonna like go to a resort. Yeah, okay, now I'm not gonna vote. Now I'm gonna vote against a policy that's gonna help regular people. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really. A lot of the times you read these stories and you're like, a lot of times like, yeah, of course they're gonna be like. But every now and then, especially with stories like this, you come across a story where you see somebody that is. You come across a story where you see these people just being absolutely heartless and just saying things that are just, I mean, it kind of blows your mind sometimes. And you don't want to believe it. You don't want to believe it. You don't want to believe that this is actually happening. You don't want to come to the realization that politicians are doing as much as they're doing. Like, they're already doing a lot, but you don't want to accept that they're doing so much to the point that it's like, it's even worse than what it already is, And I mean, that's why we have to fix this political system. That's why we have to get money out of politics. We have to get to free and fair elections. We have to make sure that these politicians can't get away with doing these things that benefit them financially and then screw over the rest of us, not only financially, but screw us over in our lives, in our regular lives, So the next topic I wanted to talk about here was the issue of Julian Assange, and this is specifically regarding Tulsi Gabbard, who is running for the Democratic presidential nomination. She is not a long time Democrat. I think she's been around for, I think this is like her third or fourth term, I think. So she's been around for like eight or so years. She was a former member of the DNC chair, former, I think, vice chair or co-chair of the DNC. She resigned in protest to support Bernie Sanders. So this is an article from Newsweek where it says Tulsi Gabbard says she would drop Julian Assange charges and pardon Edward Snowden. So that headline already catches your eye. So it says Representative Tulsi Gabbard, a Democratic presidential candidate, said the U.S. should drop criminal charges against Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. The military veteran said during a lengthy interview on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast this week that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and national security whistleblower Edward Snowden should not be prosecuted for disclosing information. Quote, what would you do about Julian Assange? What would you do about Edward Snowden? That's what Rogan said. That's what Rogan asked her. Gabbard said if she elected, she would drop the Assange charges and pardon Snowden. Quoting Gabbard here, we have got to address why Snowden did things the way he did them. She said, you hear the same thing from Chelsea Manning, how there is not an actual channel for whistleblowers like them to bring forward information that exposes egregious abuses of our constitutional rights and liberties, period. There was not a channel for that to happen in a real way, and that's why they ended up getting the path that they did and suffering the consequences. In June 2013, Snowden handed over to journalists a trove of National Security Agency documents detailing a sprawling surveillance apparatus used by global intelligence agencies. The leak showed how the systems could be used to spy on U.S. citizens through their phone calls, text messages, and internet use. After fleeing the country to Hong Kong, a warrant was issued for Snowden's arrest. Snowden was left stranded in Russia, where he was provided asylum. And that's probably a large reason why a lot of Democrats and Republicans can't stand Russia, because what Snowden did was expose the government that was run under the Barack Obama administration, but started under the Bush administration, but obviously something that both administrations were taking part in, which was this illegal spying on Americans, and they hate that Snowden in this case exposed that. So let's see the rest of the next part of this article here. It says Gabbard told the podcast host that she could still remember the day she first read the details about mass surveillance in the American press. I was shocked, she said. That was something that Snowden uncovered and released, something that I don't know that even as members of Congress we would have been aware of. Gabbard continued. So now that we are aware of it, we can take action to close these loopholes, to change those policies, to protect our civil liberties. Was the NSA going to disclose that information voluntarily? Absolutely not. Assange, whose organization helped facilitate Snowden's escape, was dramatically arrested last month and has been charged with conspiracy to commit computer hacking for agreeing to break a password to a classified U.S. government computer. That's what the Justice Department said. On Monday, Sweden reopened its investigation into a rape allegation against Assange, who is now serving 50 weeks in a high-security UK prison relating to a 2010 bail violation. As a result, the WikiLeaks founder, who denies the assault allegation, is now facing 2 extradition charges. I'll just read the last part of this now. What happened with his, this is quoting Gabbard again, it says, what happened with his arrest and all of this stuff that just went down, I think poses a great threat to our freedom of the press and to our freedom of speech. The fact that the Trump administration has chosen to ignore how important it is that we uphold our freedoms and go after him, it has a very chilling effect on both journalists and publishers, and also on every one of us as Americans. It was a warning call saying, look, what happened to this guy, it could happen to you. It could happen to any one of us. It says, according to pollsters, Joe Biden remains the most likely president to become the Democratic nominee for the presidential election. 2020 presidential election, Real Clear Politics reported Gabbard still trails far behind her Democrat rivals, including Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Pete Buttigieg. That's great. That's a great statement from Tulsi Gabbard. I am not surprised to see that she has that position. I'm very happy to see that she has a forum to come out and say that, such as the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, which is a great podcast. I love Joe Rogan. I have been a big fan of him ever since the days of watching him on Fear Factor, as well as watching him on the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is mixed martial arts. I'm a big MMA fan. And at some point I discovered his podcast, which I remember listening to many times, many times when I'm studying or many times when I'm going to the gym or something. I would always enjoy Joe Rogan's podcast. So I'm a big fan of his, and I'm glad to see that he brings on great guests. He's brought on Kyle Klinsky of Secular Talk many times. He's brought on Jimmy Dore many times. He's brought on Abby Martin many times. He's brought on Lee Camp many times. All people that are just wonderful, wonderful progressives. And he's also brought on a lot of right-wingers, which people have taken issue with. He's addressed these problems a couple times. He just says he likes listening to all different kinds of point of views. A lot of people take issue with the fact that he does not push back against what right-wingers say, what a lot of alt-right type people say. But that's a side note. But when it comes to Gabbard's comments, though, that's great for her to say, and I wish Bernie Sanders would do this. I really, really wish Bernie Sanders would come out and make statements like this. He does not He does not do it because he knows he's going to get he's going to get dinged by the Democratic Party, by the DNC, by Democratic loyalists that say, oh, well, now you're in favor of overthrowing the country. It's just a bunch of bullshit. So people just say all this stuff against Bernie. Whereas, Tulsi says that those people already don't like Tulsi Gabbard. So if they see Tulsi Gabbard saying that she supports Assange, supports Snowden, the people are just going to be like, all right, well, fuck her anyway. I didn't really like her anyway. But if it's Bernie Sanders, since Bernie Sanders has a much bigger name recognition, Bernie Sanders has a much bigger platform, he's much more well-known, they're going to dump on him much easier. And I'm not just talking about the Democrats. I'm not talking about the politicians. I'm not talking about the members of the DNC. I'm talking about people, voters. So the loyalists that you see on Twitter, social media, all these people are going to hate Bernie even more. Now they're going to hate him anyway. But it's like the whole idea of like having more essentially like information from the likes of Snowden, from the likes of Assange. People hate this, but they also hate the fact that Assange exposed the DNC, exposed what they were doing, exposing the fact that they were rigging the primary against Bernie Sanders, the fact that they that Hillary Clinton and her team and the DNC were pushing Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and Ted Cruz as Pied Pipers to face Hillary Clinton in the general election. So these things were all exposed by WikiLeaks. There was several speeches that Hillary Clinton gave to Wall Street executives, where the famous Wall Street executive speeches that Hillary never wanted to release. Many times, a lot of them were released by WikiLeaks, and Democrats can't stand that. And a lot of them say, like, well, why don't you expose Republicans? But see, what these idiot loyalists of the Democratic Party and the Democratic voters don't understand is that WikiLeaks is not a hacker. WikiLeaks just receives the information, so they don't do the hacking. WikiLeaks receives the information and gives it out for all of us to see. So WikiLeaks is not in the business of like, well, I'm going to type something and then I'm going to find it and then I'm going to show everybody. No. Their job is to expose. They're what WikiLeaks does is what real journalists in this country and just really almost honestly all over the world should be doing, and they don't do. WikiLeaks are the actual journalists. They're the actual whistleblowers, or well, they're not the whistleblowers, but they're the ones that give the voice to the whistleblowers. But they're the ones that expose. They're the ones that expose what is going on regarding corruption in this country and this world, and the elites and the oligarchs and the corrupt people in this grand scale of political, this political apparatus. They don't want these things to be exposed, so they hate Assange, they hate Edward Snowden, they hate WikiLeaks, they hate any kind of whistleblower, I would say, but Assange and Snowden are the most prominent ones, so those are the people that they hate the most. But I mean, there are whistleblowers that have come out with, they have come out with some of the most important information that a lot of people don't know about. And I mean, for Christ's sake, like let's just go down like a list of like some of the people that have exposed the different like corrupt operations and have been whistleblowers over I don't know how many decades, how many years, centuries perhaps, but so obviously aside from Edward Snowden, one of the most well-known whistleblowers in history, I would say, many would say, obviously, is Daniel Ellsberg. And Daniel Ellsberg he exposed what was referred to as the Pentagon Papers. And for those of you that do not know, the Pentagon Papers was a United States Department of Defense history of the United States' political and military involvement in Vietnam from 1945 to 1967, which is arguably not including the Iraq War and Afghanistan War, all these different wars that were involved right now, but one of the worst wars that the United States was involved in because there was so many American casualties. And it also involved a lot of Vietnamese casualties and a lot of civilians being killed. And I mean, the Vietnam War was a lot of people would consider the Vietnam War to be a loss for the United States because it was an ill-fated war and it was something that we should have never gotten involved in, and we were there for 20 plus years, and we were doing fucked up shit to millions and millions of innocent Vietnamese, and thanks to the Pentagon Papers, that got exposed, finally. And thanks to Daniel Ellsberg, and Daniel Ellsberg is considered a whistleblower, is considered somebody that is, enamored, revered, somebody that, is a hero, and he is. He should be, absolutely he is. And, the fact that people don't consider Edward Snowden as one of those is just, it's amazing, because what is the difference between what Edward Snowden did and what Daniel Ellsberg did? Both of them exposed the government. Both of them came out as whistleblowers. Both of them gave information to kind of a third party and then released it. And I mean, and at that time it seemed, and I don't know who Ellsberg released the information to. I believe it was the Washington Post. I'd have to look that up. Off the top of my head, I think it was the Washington Post. Anyway, whatever it was, there was no WikiLeaks back then, though. So obviously whoever Ellsberg gave the information to, he obviously gave it to somebody that was a journalist and was somebody that released this information to a major publication. And because obviously there was no internet, there was no kind of, non-journalistic entities to give to, so you have to go to a journalist, right? So he ended up giving it to whoever that person or whoever that entity was, and released it. And luckily back then we had real journalists. Back then when the Pentagon Papers were released and all that stuff was exposed, back then we had journalists. These days we don't. So because we don't have real journalists today, and we have people that cater to the establishment and cater to the deep state, we have people that don't want to get criticized or called out for doing things that the deep state and the military industrial complex doesn't want. So, and that's something that Edward Snowden did, and God forbid he did it. Oh my God, how dare you? Chelsea Manning, he's another whistleblower. He exposed a great, not a great, but a very, frankly, disturbing video. It was an Apache helicopter video. I'm gonna put the link to it. The link to the video it's on YouTube. I'll put the link to the video of it in the description box. But it's an Apache helicopter video shown in, I believe it was Iraq, where an Apache helicopter, I think it was Marines, I believe. I forgot which branch of the military, but it was a helicopter that was shooting down at innocent civilians who, I think the members of the military were claiming were Iraqis with guns and weapons or whatever, AK-47s or whatever the hell the guns they had, and they were apparently a threat, so they decided to shoot at them. So and they killed a lot of them, and they would kill a lot of the first responders that were trying to come and help the people that were killed or shot or injured or whatever, and they killed those people too. And the whole time during that and this was all caught on video footage for some reason. And the whole time when they were shooting at these who turned out to be innocent people, and a lot of them were reporters, I believe, too. They were shooting at these people. They were laughing. They were making jokes. They were like, "Oh, you got him? Oh, he got fucked up. that's pretty damn funny over there. Look at that guy." So they were cracking jokes the entire time. They're fucking, shooting at these innocent people for, I guess, their personal enjoyment, I guess. So, yeah, just a bunch of pricks, man. I mean, so thank God for Chelsea Manning. Thank God for Edward Snowden. Thank God for Julian Assange. I would hope if Tulsi Gabbard were president, because, so Chelsea Manning did get pardoned eventually by President Obama, but she's back in jail now for another bogus bullshit charge. I haven't had time to look into the details of it, but she's in jail again. I mean, I would hope if she had the opportunity to give her freedom, the freedom that she had and the freedom that she deserves. Hopefully, Tulsi Gabbard, if she were president, would do that as well. So, and I'm glad to see Tulsi Gabbard say this. I wish Bernie Sanders would say this. I wish a lot of other candidates, Elizabeth Warren, which I wouldn't expect her to, but I wish she would say this, But a lot of these people, a lot of these politicians, aside from Tulsi Gabbard, maybe Mike Gravel, aside from that, a lot of these people don't have the balls to say these things because they don't want to get called out as being, anti-American or anti-whatever, even among Democrats, which is sad. So it's pathetic. So I'm going to talk about one more article today. We're a little bit past the 3-hour mark or so, even though I had a couple of times that I had some technical difficulties with my Facebook live feed and everything. So, but we're around the 3-hour mark. I just wanted to talk about this article. It's an article from AP. And it's about Beto O'Rourke essentially trying to do a reintroduction. He's basically doing a redux, a 2.0 version of himself. Beto O'Rourke, who I refer to as Beto Obama. He had a big kind of showing when he first came out and announced his presidency. Everybody lost their shit and cummed in their pants over him and shit. So now apparently poor Beto is not having a very good time. So I just wanted to detail go into the details about it with you guys a little bit here and see what you guys think, and we'll discuss it. So the title of the article is Beto O'Rourke plans, quote, reintroduction as 2020 buzz fizzles. It says Beto O'Rourke barreled into the 2020 presidential race with breakneck energy and a fly-by-the-seat of his pants campaign style that saw him leap atop tables to address overflow crowds with the organic, off-the-cuff candor that had made him a Texas sensation. Obviously, as you can tell from the tone of this article, they're already fawning over him. The next paragraph says, but since his mid-March campaign launch, the buzz surrounding the former congressman has evaporated. Competing in a massive field of Democratic White House hopefuls, O'Rourke has sagged in the polls. He's made few promises that resonated or produced headline-grabbing moments, instead driving around the country, meeting with voters at mostly small events. I wouldn't be surprised if his events are small. Especially since everything he says is fucking typical cliches and platitudes. It says, in a tacit recognition that this approach isn't working, O'Rourke is planning to try again, taking a hands-on role in staging a reintroduction ahead of next month's premier Democratic presidential debate. As he finalizes his plans, O'Rourke has entered an intentional quiet period, quote unquote, to build out campaign infrastructure, according to an advisor who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss the campaign's strategy. That will end soon. So apparently that strategy is going to end soon. O'Rourke plans to step up his national media appearances after skipping most of that kind of exposure in recent months. He is scheduled to appear on MSNBC's Rachel Maddow show on Monday night and ABC's The View the next day. By the way, just to point out, this is an article from the 11th of May, so he already made those appearances. So I might show it to you guys, or I might just put it in the voice, in the description box for you guys to check out. He's also set to offer more concrete policy plans on top issues. So far, he's issued just one on climate change. O'Rourke acknowledges he's struggled to find his presidential campaign footing. Quoting him, he says, I think in part, I was just trying to keep up when I first started out, he said after addressing about 40 people at a recent house party in Newton, Ohio. I really feel like I found my rhythm and my pace, and I just feel comfortable, and I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. His top aides denied that a full reinvention or Beto 2.0 is in the works. They note that O'Rourke plans to keep packing days with as many as half a dozen campaign events. He'll still venture into off the beaten path locales that include rural, heavy Republican areas. Those were the trademarks of the Senate campaign last fall when he nearly toppled Republican Senator Ted Cruz by visiting all of deep red Texas's 254 counties. But his team also acknowledges that for all its excitement, O'Rourke's initial campaign launch exposed some disorganization, assembling a campaign staff while the 2020 roadshow was already rollicking along simply wasn't sustainable. It took O'Rourke nearly 2 weeks after announcing his campaign to formally hire Jen O'Malley Dillon to run his team. She was the deputy campaign manager of Barack Obama's 2012 re-election bid and is only now moving on to O'Rourke's headquarters in El Paso, Texas, after doing the job from Washington. Wow. He didn't even have somebody on site in his own headquarters. Interesting. That's probably why you're not doing too well, buddy. It says O'Rourke added 16 staffers recently in Iowa, which holds the first presidential caucus, but that's fewer than some other candidates have. In New Hampshire, which votes next, O'Rourke has yet to formally announce a state director or campaign staff, though he has informal organizers there. Man, this guy's extremely unprepared. He does not know what he's doing. I mean, even the people who are advising him can't tell him this shit. It was ready, fire, aim sort of trajectory, said Chris Lippincott, a Texas consultant who ran an outside political group opposing Ted Cruz in 2018. Kathy Sullivan, a Democratic National Committee member from New Hampshire, noted that after events, if you don't have somebody with a clipboard taking names and addresses and phone numbers, you can lose contact with folks. Doesn't he know this already, though? I mean, apparently him and his people obviously don't know about that. Sullivan recently had lunch with O'Rourke in New Hampshire's capital, Concord, as part of a small women's group and found him to be very sincere, very thoughtful. But she also said that his falling out of the 2020 spotlight helped boost another young unorthodox candidate, Pete Buttigieg, mayor of South Bend, Indiana. So yeah, Buttigieg, I think I covered an article on my first episode about how Buttigieg was gaining a lot of his popularity. So he was stealing the popularity that O'Rourke had, and he was getting it for Buttigieg was getting it for himself. Maybe I didn't discuss. I don't know. I don't remember, but I remember either way, I do remember hearing about that. It says the work to bolster the campaign has begun to stabilize things. Earlier this week, O'Rourke announced hiring Jeff Berman, a top delegate guru who helped Obama navigate the complicated process of locking up enough support to secure the Democratic presidential nomination. Isn't it funny how he's trying so hard to be like Obama? I mean, I don't know. I don't find it funny because I think it's obvious that O'Rourke clearly wants to be. I'm sorry. I think it's pretty obvious that O'Rourke clearly wants to be just like President Obama, or at least before he was president for sure, because he's getting all the people that used to work for his campaign. Not so much working with him in the White House though, but obviously those people are separate. Obviously, those kind of people. But let's see here. It says. It said, quote, it says O'Rourke, it has been building up over time, O'Rourke said of his campaign's apparatus. I think we're getting better organized all the time. It says that he maintains that it's still early. During his first trip to Iowa in March, O'Rourke focused on eastern counties that had supported Obama but went for Donald Trump in 2016. More recently, he sought out the relatively few Democrats in the state's rural Southwest, trying to do the spade work, as the country folk he's trying to woo might say, to slowly grow lasting support. Quoting O'Rourke again here, it says, with 21, maybe more candidates on the horizon, this is going to be decided by a matter of a few hundred votes, maybe a few dozen votes, O'Rourke said after speaking at a former livestock auction space in Shenandoah, Iowa, that's been converted into a spiffy hall for weddings and parties. So every one of these conversations matters. It It says one holdover from O'Rourke's do-it-yourself style in Texas, yourself style in Texas, is his insistence on driving himself between events, repeatedly coming behind the wheel of rented Dodge Grand Caravans. Some campaign staffers see it as time that could be spent doing more productive, or at least less potentially dangerous things. But O'Rourke's unfazed. So he's trying to like be like a regular guy, like, oh, I'm driving around in my truck, I'm driving in my Dodge Grand Caravan. Okay. I mean, instead of pushing the ideas that would help people, he wants to drive in trucks just like regular people do. Yeah, so the rest of the article just points out how he's trying to, push positive energy, and he's going all over New Hampshire, 10 New Hampshire counties in 48 hours. Apparently he's driving to all these places. He takes questions from attendees at every stop and is quick enough on his feet to usually provide detailed answers before pivoting to his talking points. Okay. One person he spoke to apparently quoted, said, Marsha Fulton, a 78-year-old retired teacher and school administrator who saw O'Rourke at a restored train depot in Creston, Ohio, said she's not decided on who she'll vote for yet, but he was really impressive, more so than I expected. He was prepared, and that was a real question given his youth. Okay. It says here on this last part, it says, he's going to slow down a bit, said Sandy Sothman, the co-vice chairman of the Cass County Democrats who watched O'Rourke speak at a sunny hillside park in Atlantic, Iowa. When he gets going and talks about so many things at once, it becomes a little like, is he riffing or what? Yeah. So that's the end of the article. Listen, at the end of the day, Beto O'Rourke does not have, and same with Pete Buttigieg, by the way. Same with a lot of these candidates, honestly. But if you were to put two guys at the forefront of most uninteresting, but like being enamored because of their looks and their age, those two guys are Beto O'Rourke and Pete Buttigieg. And the lack of substance from these two guys is just, it's like groundbreaking how bad they are at like making their arguments and just being completely uninteresting and being totally like appealing to nobody except a bunch of people that think like because they're young and they're like good looking, and they're not good looking, but they're young and good looking, and whatever, Buttigieg is gay, and then O'Rourke, O'Rourke can speak Spanish or something. I think Pete Buttigieg speaks Norwegian or something. Like, for some reason, like, again, it goes back to the kind of whole thing that I was talking about before in one of my other segments about how, Joe Biden picking Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams or somebody as a black woman as his vice presidential, his presidential pick. It's the same thing as this. People focus on these shallow little, traits from a person or something that they do or the way they act, and they think that's something that's gonna like be a great attribute as a president. But notice there's nothing about policy. They don't even know any of his policies. So when this person says that, he was prepared, and that was a real question given his youth. Prepared for what? What was he saying? He wasn't saying anything. I guarantee you he wasn't saying anything. He was swinging his arms, and, he's really, one thing that O'Rourke is really well known for is he's swinging his arms. He's going like this a lot. He's like, you think he's like a, he's got some sort of like, I don't know. There's something wrong with his arms. I don't know what it is. It's just, but in reality, what he's trying to do is he's trying to make himself like seem like this energetic guy that's like, like everybody wants to listen to, and like every one of his words has to like come with like a hand motion. It's like kind of like Trump. Yeah. Now that I think about it, it's very much like Trump. Like Trump likes to like this, and yeah, I'm the best. You know what I'm talking about? I'm the greatest. I'm a great businessman. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all these different movements. So in O'Rourke's case, it's just the only difference is that he likes to stand on top of tables and shit for some reason. and he likes to like go into like coffee shops and talk. So the guy is just completely, he's totally is inorganic a word. He's the opposite of organic. Let's just put it that way. He's not an organic speaker. He doesn't think of anything off the top of his head. Everything is rehearsed. Everything is planned out to make sure it's, you know, talking points. I mean, he doesn't have any original ideas. When his only policy, you know, positions that he's or policy proposal or policy ideas that he's come up with is climate change, one issue. And who knows even know what, I don't even know what his position is on climate change. I'm sure it's like just the typical Democratic point of view. But if that's the only thing that you can come up with, I mean, that's pretty pathetic. You can't come up with anything better than climate change to talk on. You can't talk about healthcare. You can't talk about, you know, the income inequality. You can't talk about, I don't know. You can't talk about abortion. You can't talk about these issues that are, you know, central in the Democratic platform. I mean, abortion, you know, reproductive rights. These are easy. You easily talk about these things, especially when it comes to doing a campaign. So if you're, I don't know, making an appearance on some talk show or something, you can easily bring that up. But I don't know. It seems like he doesn't do. I don't know if he did that with his appearance. Was it on The View? I think it was on The View and Rachel Maddow's show. I'm gonna have to watch those segments possibly, or I'll just show it to you guys. You guys can check it out. I don't know if he talked about those issues on those shows, but if he did, I mean, he probably didn't get into that much detail because you don't really have that much time to talk about it. But if he did, he went over like the usual talking points that most of these candidates do. So he probably didn't get into detail. I would be very surprised. So at the end of the day, I think, and you know, Kyle from Secular Talk made the same point. I think Beto O'Rourke is going to be one of those. He's going to be like another version. He's going to be the Democrats' version of Jeb Bush. And Jeb Bush was the guy that everybody was like fawning all over. Oh my God, Jeb Bush! He's going to face Hillary in the 2016. You know, it's going to be him and Hillary, Jeb Bush and Hillary in the 2016 general election. Eventually, Jeb Bush, because he was so boring and so pathetic, he just flamed out. And that seems like what is happening with Beto O'Rourke. And the fact that he tries so hard to be like Barack Obama and tries to hire all of his staffers and all of his people and stuff. Apparently, a while back, he hired a bunch of people that used to work for Bernie's, I think, 2016 campaign, and then they left. So, like, that was like a big deal. People were like, I remember a lot of Democratic loyalists were like, "Oh my God, he got some people from Bernie. He's gaining that momentum." And then eventually, they just like they got sick of him and they left, and they don't even like Beto O'Rourke anymore. So. Again, the guy is totally uninteresting. Nobody wants to get, you know, hyped for this guy other than, you know, acknowledging the fact that he faced Ted Cruz in Texas, almost beat him in Texas, almost became the senator there. And because of that, they fawn all over him because he almost beat a right-wing guy and he couldn't even beat that guy. So he almost beat a right-wing guy in Texas, and then everybody wants to pretend like he can, you know, resonate all over the country, when in reality he can't. And I don't think that Pete Buttigieg is going to resonate all over the country either. So I think they're both, you know, they're two sides of the same coin, and I think they're both going to falter and they're both going to flame out, just like a lot of the so-called hopefuls of the Republican Party did in 2016 as well. Okay, so that's the end of the show today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I saw a lot of people were talking about how they were watching me on Twitter. I really appreciate you guys promoting me and promoting my show and my Periscope live broadcast here. I'm sorry to my Facebook live viewers that you know, my feed kind of cut out there. Not sure what happened there. Hopefully you guys were still able to watch and enjoy. And as usual, I would just want to remind you guys, please, if you can become a patron, go visit my Patreon page, patreon.com, Prog Blacksmith, PROGBLACKSMITH. And if you can give even the smallest or biggest donation, I would greatly appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys again next time. Take care.